Good morning. Happy Monday to everybody. Thanks for being here. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for March 14th, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamberth, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair Lady, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any personal orders or announcements before we get underway? Seeing none, we have several budget hearings scheduled today. So first up will be the Department of Tourist Development. Members, your dashboard has all of the slides as well as if you're not able to see them on the screen. And we will go out of session and we'll ask Commissioner Ezell to come forward. Commissioner Ezell, thank you for being here bright and early on a Monday morning. And I know you're going to tell us about all the good things that are happening that are bringing people to Tennessee and all of that tourist money that is going to into our coffers, which we appreciate very much. So without further ado, if you want to just get started with your presentation, that'll be great.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Chair Lady Hazelwood, Vice Chair Baum, members of the House Finance, Ways and Means Committee. I'm Mark Ezell. I'm Commissioner of Tourist Development for Tennessee. I'm here along with Assistant Commissioners Brian Wagner, Melanie Beecham, Pete Rosenborough, and Kevin Mahoney. And in keeping with your request, we will keep this to 5 minutes and then try to provide plenty of time for questions. So as you know, tourism is critical for both the communities that we serve and for creating visitor spending, which creates business revenue, then jobs, and then at the end, that tax revenue. So as you can see, we are requesting $5.5 million in recurring funds to support our domestic and international marketing efforts. And then in addition, we are seeking $25 million for a special event fund pilot project that will be a program that incentivizes and attracts and maintains high-profile events. You'll see here our proposed reduction plan. And then tourism, I want to talk for just a couple of minutes. Tourism is our second leading industry, as you know. And you'll remember that in 2019, we were setting all kinds of records, completing a decade of record growth with literally record growth, both domestically and internationally. And then COVID happened to our industry, devastated that industry more than any industry financially in Tennessee. In fact, it also got all the way to our state budgets. The last 10 months of the year, in 2020, this again, all of my numbers now come from the folks that I know you trust the most, and that's the Department of Revenue. And these are the sales and use taxes for leisure and hospitality areas. So that would be attractions, restaurants, and hotels, accommodations. But back then, we lost $303 million in state revenues for those 10 months from those areas, particularly in those two largest communities of Davidson and Shelby, which were over 200 million. So our job was, we came to you, you granted us a record budget, you allowed us to do some things with federal money with the CARES Act, and we said we want to help restore visitation that drives those jobs back for those communities and brings taxes in. So, I'm ahead, sorry. So we teamed with so many people and got to talk about so many of the great things, whether it's our wonderful outdoors, our family attractions, our big cities, our smaller communities for getaways, our friendliness, our diversity of tourism assets. You know, we got to let out-of-state travelers know that Tennessee was open for business to do so safely. And so the people came. So we got our music back now playing. So here's the not just good news, but great news. We had an outstanding year. In 2021, leisure and hospitality sales tax was $1.52 billion. That goes straight to your budget and to our budget. That's an increase of $134 million. That's not $134 million over 2020. That's $134 million over our record 2019 year. So we are so grateful to our industry, to the resiliency that they have done. It was over 9.7 over our record 2019. So what's also impressive, if you'll take a look, is the 94 million. The 94 million is from the 90 counties that were not our top 5 counties. And to see the kind of growth that those 90 counties had was so inspiring, and we are so appreciative of what they do. So we told you if we got more money, we'd spend that on telling people. We did spend that on telling people. We now reached 70 million people instead of 35, knowing that if we tell them about tourism, it's worth them hearing about it. So I'll quickly, because of time, we've partnered with people like Google to talk to our distressed and at-risk communities and help them get ready, with the University of Tennessee, with a tremendous angler like Bill Dance, and we're going to create a world-class fishing program that's going to benefit 22 distressed at-risk counties. So many good things, and I'll skip ahead just to close and to say, you saw that we helped our industry create 134 million. That's 437 million more than last year. So the 303 has now been erased with a 437 million. Hopefully you're believing that tourism is real money. It does create jobs. Our budget has not had a recurring adjustment in 8 years. The state this year, our request is less than last year's, but with the need for recurring is because we've been spending that money. And then the last item is to talk about the 25 million special event pilot program. Tennessee's had a proven track record with some great events like the Nashville Draft, the Battle at Bristol, Ironman World Championship, so many others. We know there are measurable events that we should be pursuing as a state. Texas has had a fund for 20 years. There's 20 states that have a type of fund like this so that they can be competitive in creating events. And here's the good news. We can create criteria that either we go after these events and they bring us much more money, or we don't have them. And these are events that are on record as if they're going to come to Tennessee, there's a fee that has to be paid to get those events. And the economic impact that they bring is real tourism dollars in multiples. So just want to take a minute and to answer questions and to let you know that our job is to try to drive visitors that drive revenue. 2021, you allowed us to do that. We are really grateful. Our industry was so resilient. They have battled back. We've had some great successes, and for that, we're thankful for. So these 2 requests are to help us equip Tennessee with the best ability to bring more visitors and more revenue to our state. We're honored to be a key part of that driver, and with those 2 budget items, we're open for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think we're all excited to see these numbers. It's a great turnaround story from where we were. And I think one of the more exciting things, and I'm sure there'll be questions about this and we'll dig a little deeper, but the fact that $94 million is being spent outside of what we would normally expect to be the big tourist meccas. So that speaks to a lot of work, I think, that's been done to let people outside the state and inside the state know more about what's available in our more rural areas. But we do have a list of questions, and I begin with Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Thank y'all for being with us today and taking time to answer some of these questions. The department is responsible for the operations of Tennessee with the 16 welcome centers located on the interstates. The department utilizes traffic counters at these welcome centers to track the number of visitors. My first question would be, can the department provide an update on the status of the welcome centers and their maintenance? And also, are all of them open?
It's a great question. I'm so glad we got a talented leader like Assistant Commissioner Rosenberg, because we got some exciting news. Pete, you want to talk about the visitor counts and some of those pieces?
Good morning. The last question, all 16 state welcome centers are open. Last year, we did, the CARES dollars allowed us to get state-of-the-art traffic counters. And last year, we seen over 14 million visitors in all 16 of our state welcome centers. As you know, Tourism oversees the day-to-day operation of the welcome centers, and TDOT is responsible for the funding and all capital projects.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I know the department experienced some issues in 2020 with those traffic counters. Are all the new devices installed and working now?
They are installed and working, and we actually had an internal meeting, and we are truly excited about the data that we are receiving from the new traffic counters.
And I might add too that the last quarter of 2021 was the highest since we've been tracking attendance. It was the highest in our 8 years of tracking. So really exciting. People are back out on the road and coming to see our welcome centers.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Can you give me a basic idea of what these new counters cost? And is there, once they're installed in operation, is there any recurring cost to them?
And I'm going to defer to our Assistant Commissioner of Administration for the budgeting piece of that and the recurring dollars.
Good morning. Kevin Mahoney, Assistant Commissioner of Administration. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I know the entire program was about $130,000 to get those counters in across the state. And there is a recurring cost. It was minimal, and it was mainly to run the network just so the signals could update and report on those. It was a few $1,000s. I think it was $100 and something per device, but I can get that to you, the exact amounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
And just to follow up on that, what's the life of that technology? Is there a replacement in the future? Although that's a very minimal cost, or when do we have to look at getting the equipment or replacing it or upgrading it?
I want to say it was 10 to 20-year equipment, but I don't have that in front of me.
Well, at least nothing we need to worry about in the next couple of budgets, right? All right, thank you. Next on my list, Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a personal order. It's spring break back in Greenville this week, and my 10-year-old daughter, Caitlin, is going to spend some time down here. So, Caitlin, why don't you stand up, baby girl? Just to see how much you've grown. If you see her around anywhere and have some work to do, she's glad to do the work. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Caitlin, we are so sorry. Most kids go to Disney World or somewhere really cool on their spring break, and your daddy brings you here. But we're glad to have you. Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner. And again, I just want to tell you, I just really appreciate the great job you and your staff do. I enjoyed so much working with you and all you do for our state.
Thank you, sir.
And well, listen, the question I have this morning is the initiative, the Tennessee on Me.
Yes.
Could you give us an update how that turned out, and was any revenue left over? Did it go back to the general fund, and just the impact that had on the state?
Thank you, Representative Whitson, and good question. And we're really pleased to get to talk about Tennessee on Me now because of the data. Again, back then we didn't have the results to that information, but we spent a little less than $600,000 on vouchers. We spent less than 6% of our media dollars to support that. So it was one of several programs. It recorded the largest number of impressions of any campaign that we did, with hundreds of millions of impressions, drove hundreds of thousands of people to our website. What we knew is that it was an offer that required someone to come in and stay at a particular hotel at an off-season time, and that we would generate sales tax dollars. I think the best number I would give you for Davidson County in the 6 months prior, and again, Tennessee on Me was just one of the many programs that we did to benefit our bigger cities and also our smaller communities. But it was in hotel lodging tax revenue. The first 6 months of the year was averaging a $4 million deficit a month. So it's $24 million to the state budget deficit. That's one county. The last 6 months of the year, with a whole lot of programs, we broke even. in Davidson County, a swing of $24 million. And that's just for Davidson County. So we're really pleased with the results of that campaign. And again, what's important for people to realize is we're trying to do a lot of things to encourage folks to come to see all the parts of Tennessee.
Thank you. And so the money that was left over went back to the general fund?
It went into it was designated to our department, and we continued to spend it as we thought we would on so many other programs.
Understand in Alabama, they had a program where it was a promotional. First prize was like 2 free nights in Alabama, and second prize was 4 free nights in Alabama. And so,
Watch it, Sam.
Representative Whitson, we're about taking bacon off another man's hog. And that's what that campaign was about, was how do we get people to spend time? We'll let them have their sand and others casinos, and we'll use all the great things to get them to come to Tennessee.
well, thank you, Chairman, or Commissioner. And again, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman Whitson, might I remind you, I believe that you have a son and daughter-in-law and grandchildren who live in the great state of Alabama. They might not appreciate your disparagement.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I hate to get between this. I was kind of enjoying that. Commissioner, thank you for being here. And
Thank
let me
you.
back up just for a second. So, and I don't mean to stay on Tennessee on me. So is that program, is it ongoing, or was that just last year?
No.
Where is
It
that?
ended, it began on July 1st at, again, Tennessee's largest tourist event ever in front of 350,000 people is how we put. We wanted to tell people we were open, and this was an out-of-state campaign. So we started that and ended in December.
Okay.
So we have completed that campaign.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit to the Office of Rural Tourism, which is near and dear to my heart, being
Yeah.
that I represent a very rural community out there in Hancock County and Hawkins and Claiborne County. Last year, if I recall, I think there was $2 million that was set aside to hire someone just for that program, that rural tourism program. Can you kind of give me a status? Has someone been hired?
Yes.
And now what does that program look like? And what are we doing to try to reach those rural communities?
Well, thank you for the question. And it's really the missional part of what we're getting to do in working with those distressed and at risk, and to have a leader like Assistant Commissioner Beecham to yes, that person has been hired. And so I'll let her take you through a few of the pretty exciting results so far.
Good morning. So what the Office of Rural
If you
Tourism.
would, just for the record,
Excuse me.
just state your name and position,
Sure,
please.
I'm
Thank
Melanie
you.
Beecham. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Rural Tourism and Outreach. So when we got our program started, I'm just going to talk through a little bit of what the program entails so far. The first thing that we did is we offered our marketing grant that we typically is typically a 1-to-1 match for our distressed counties at an 80-20. We added funding into that budget to allow for more of our distressed partners to be a part of that. So that's a marketing grant that we offer each year, and so we expanded that right out of the gate. We have offered scholarships to our governor's conference, STS Marketing College. Just education is a big part of our program. And so we've also entered into an interagency agreement with the University of Tennessee, where we are building a mentorship program, workshops, and a rural studio. Because what we know is that we have to teach more about tourism and also destination development. And so on the education piece, that is in process with UT. We're really, really excited about it. I think we mentioned last year that Colorado was a model for us, and we went and followed them to learn more about their program. And so on the education piece, that is something that we've done. Technical assistance is another part of our program, because we know bandwidth is an issue in our rural communities. You may have someone at the chamber, but they wear a lot of different hats, and tourism is a small part of what they do. And so technical assistance, we partnered with Google on what we call a DMO audit. And so we have so far worked with, we have done audits for 9 counties with another 7 in process. And what we do is we audit their Google listings, because when people come to an area, they want to search, And if that information is incorrect, it creates a bad experience. And so those are some of the programs that we've already have in play. As for the position, that was the rural position
Yep.
too, right?
Correct.
Yep, that's correct. And we have hired somebody for that.
And I would just add, teaching folks in distressed and at-risk counties that how do we turn a visit into commerce and then into revenue and therefore then into tax revenue for them. It's not coincidental that all of those counties pretty much struggle in getting out-of-state people leaving them enough money. And that's what tourism is about. How do we get out-of-staters to come in, spend money, leave their money, and then go home? And we don't have the infrastructure and we capture. So really pleased, a couple of them have added lodging taxes locally there for them. Again, that was for out-of-towners. They're creating budgets on their own because long-term we want to teach them how to fish, not to just give them fish. It's really going well.
That's exciting. I guess the one thing about where I represent, and I think most on this panel would agree, especially those that represent rural, these folks know how to sell their communities. They know what will sell. I guess let me say that. Maybe they don't know exactly how to sell it, but they know what will sell. And so I just hope that's one thing, one aspect of this program is that the locals are really driving this for what works in their community. Hancock County's got the Clinch River. Canoeing over there is huge. And so some of the things that they're looking to try to expand. So I'm excited about that. But go back to that marketing grant just for a second. You
Sure.
said 1-to-1 at 80-20.
So that as this is a grant that we have had for many years. It was a 1-to-1 grant. So for all partners, it's a 1-to-1 match. So what we saw was a lot of our distressed counties weren't taking advantage of this because of budget, just not having enough budget. So we changed it for distressed counties to be an 80-20 match.
Okay.
And so their match is 20.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
all.
Thank you.
And remind us how many distressed counties we now have in Tennessee, how many are fitting into that category,
We have 9 distressed counties.
which is, I think, worthy of note that that
Yes.
number has decreased
It's gone
because of
down.
work done by your department and many others. But,
Thank you,
and a
Madam
lot of
Chair.
efforts that this administration is really focused on. Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner and team. Quick question related to the $100 million allocation of ARP funds by FSAG, $45 million for marketing, $55 for pass-through grants for destination marketing organizations. I think those funds have to be used by 2024. Can you talk a little bit about those funds
Yes.
and if they've been expended yet and what the plan is to be able to utilize those moving forward?
Great question. We are so excited. And again, thank you for your role in allowing us to do that, to build out some multi-year planning. What was important, in fact, Representative Hicks, what you just said, we believe in local. I grew up with a family business, and I know that branding needs to be done locally. And we are the overbrand at the state to support those counties. That's why we gave $50 million of that will go directly to the 113 destination marketing organizations. No county is going to get less than $100,000 over the next 4 years. Representative, it is through 2026. And that allows them, that's what's so special about this is we're going to get to help them plan how to build out transformational projects. And so that's what that 50 million will be done with throughout all of our communities. We were very successful in CARES Act. In 2020, Tennessee grew its market share in tourism more than ever in our state's history. And we believe we have the assets to keep on doing that. And then the 5 million goes to a lot of those communities that need that destination development. And then I'll let Assistant Commissioner Wagner talk a little bit about the 45 million that we will spend to be working on domestic and then that important international. Brian, introduce.
Hi, Brian Wagner, Assistant Commissioner of Marketing. Let me see here. Sorry about that. Hi, Brian Wagner, Assistant Commissioner of Marketing. So yeah, it is truly exciting to have those kind of resources to continue to expand upon what's already been accomplished. You know, with the CARES Act funding, we were able to expand into the new markets. As Commissioner Ezell noted earlier, we're now talking to a potential reach of nearly 70 million instead of 35 million. Well, to be able to sustain marketing campaigns through all the different tactics that we use, is you're going to just see that visitor lift continue to increase over the coming years. I mean, really, it's just a sustainability to keep that going and get more people into Tennessee. So we've increased our market share, and we want to sustain that because Tennessee has really never been positioned better than it is right now.
And I would just add, 2 years ago, that is the last time we can get someone to compare us to the rest of the nation. But Tennessee had the largest pipeline of hotel rooms, percentage-wise, of any state in America. And today, that number is still a very impressive. We added 4,000 rooms in 2021. We have another in a combination of either construction or in planning, and others, another 20,000 rooms that are in a version of that. So the private industry is spending over $10 billion over a 5-year period betting on Tennessee. And we don't have sand and we don't have casinos. But after that, we got assets that people will come and experience our friendliness. And all those represent, every time an out-of-towner comes, they just leave us $15 in that new hotel room every night. And so that's what gets us really pumped about the future and the CARES Act. And now the AARP money is going to be money you're counting on us spending wisely with the industry to bring those dollars in.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner, it's good to hear that things are bouncing back and that we're over our 2019 levels and things have come back from the pandemic. I have a question about the CARES Act funding. I believe we got 25 million, but some remains unspent. I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about the unspent portion.
Yes. The good news is we ended up with a total of 25.7. Again, we passed through a lot of that money, but we spent 25.4. So at almost 99% of the money, one of the highest grant usages. That couple of $100,000 I'll turn over to Assistant Commissioner Mahoney, but we are really thankful our teams battled to get that money spent quickly.
So I may have to actually punt this back over to Assistant Commissioner Beecham, but basically some of that underspend was some of the timing with those grants, those pass-through grants. Some of the communities didn't use them or chose not to use them, but they all had the availability for it. But Melanie, you may have additional details on that.
So of the 15,225,000 for the DMO pass-through, we had a balance of 461,000. We had 4 counties out of all of the 4 DMOs out of the 117 DMOs not participate. And those 4 happened to be where they don't have a tourism office, and it was the mayor. And mayor's had a lot of CARES Act that they were working on. So, and then that funding, Kevin, went back, the funding that was not used went back into the
difference between that 400 and the 300 was we found other projects on the other side that were eligible that we were able to fill in the last minute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, Vice Chair, what we would say is helping make sure somebody doesn't turn down free federal money is part of that education process. And the good news is we got 4 years to spend the money in ARP, not 5 months. So building out those local teams is really going to be critical, teaching them how to spend money to help themselves and to create that tax revenues, what our mission will be.
Sounds good. Thank you for your good work on this.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege to thank the commissioner for adding so much joy to my youth. As it was always a big day when the purity truck pulled up to our house, and we knew we had we probably drank a gallon of milk at every meal.
Ooh, that's a good customer.
I will say this, also probably one of the biggest times I ever got in trouble as a child was my brother and I would sneak out and add ice cream and lemonade to the delivery ticket. And we did it for a good deal of the summer, and my mom called and fussed at the delivery person and said, "Why do you keep bringing this?" And they presented back the tickets where we'd marked them up, and we spent the last couple weeks of our summer break in trouble. So I just want to share that here.
Thank you.
So you
That's
talked a little bit
meaningful.
about the $25 million grant to attract new events and sporting events. And you talked a little bit about the why, but are there a couple of targets that we're looking at? Are there events that that are kind of the dream event? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, and what we feel like is really important is that you would be able to see the criteria that we would build out. These 20 states that have various types of funds all have very serious criteria that are built around economic impact, that are built around room nights, that are built around exposures. These are not random grants. These are you are evaluating those events. You can read about some of them. You're aware of some of the things that I think the local media here in Nashville has certainly mentioned a few things that Nashville is in play for, like a FIFA. A FIFA event is worth tens and tens of millions of dollars to our state sales tax, and that's just when the events happen, not the fact that you had international travelers come to your community for the first time ever. But what you probably don't get to see, and even what we don't get to see, is the number of cities across the state that are in play for worldwide events right now. And there are a number of them. They're not publicly disclosed yet, so we don't have access to be able to talk about those. But all of those events, there's two that I am thinking of right now that those events have not been in the United States in decades. And you have a city, not Nashville, not Memphis, other cities that are out there that are being eligible for these event funds. And then there are events that are coming to Tennessee that are expecting us to be able to keep them to come. Things like the Music City Grand Prix, for example, is just one example. That group brought in, all the indications are they brought in $30 to $40 million of economic impact. Let's be conservative and say 25 million. Well, it generated then 7% on that number, or $2.5 million just when that event was here, for them to be eligible for grants. And that's why this event pilot program would allow us to take care of those kinds of events. And we know we're in play for more. And again, what we're seeing is the states that are offering those funds are getting those, and those that are not are losing them or not able to compete.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you for that. And I would also like to thank you and encourage you to continue making sure that these events are also fun for the community that they're in. The Grand Prix, the draft, I took my family down, and those were great. I would have traveled somewhere to go see them, but it was nice to have them here in our backyard. So thanks for that. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, sir.
And just a couple of follow-ups on that.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the criteria that would be fairly stringent criteria that would be developed. Where are we in that process, and when might we have a look at what that criteria is?
Well, we are pretty far down the road in our research. So we have been studying what the other states have done with their event funds. We're not trying to be a Texas. Texas spends $46 million a year on their event fund. And they grab a lot of events. What we know is that we'll be able to bring back some of those events on the economic models, tourism economics, and several others that cities and states put together when they're bidding on those kind of projects. Certain number of room nights that they know a FIFA event or Music City Grand Prix and others generate. So we think we've really got most of the criteria established. The details will be the fund get approved, and then how do we build out? How's the wisest way to spend that money? What opportunities are out there? So in the next week, we can certainly share some of that information with you immediately as it relates to the general criteria, but a lot of it will depend on the size of the fund and how we want to allocate those dollars.
I think just in the interest of transparency for those of us on this committee, if we could get just a general idea of those criteria, room nights, whatever other things play into it, then that would be great. And I guess the other
Yes, ma'am.
question I would have, How did you come up with the $25 million? Is that enough? Is that based on, I know Texas is much larger,
Yes.
and so that's not a fair comparison, but what other states did you look at that do this, that have like more similar budgets, I guess?
Well, Louisiana, and we've got our data director here, that Adam Manziel, who's been leading us, because we actually went and got a company to do our research. Ohio has a fund, Missouri has a fund, a number of states that have special event funds that are primarily either convention or sporting type events, things that, again, you're only going to host those once in every decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. And so the question is, we felt like, and again, this came through the community input sessions that the governor's office had, and the governor then brought that request to us, and we said, absolutely, to have the ability to have those funds. So we won't really know whether 25 million is the right one. I hope we'd have to spend it quickly because it would mean that we would be landing the big fish. And we don't know if we would do that. I think it's a good number to start a pilot program with and then be prepared. The problem is we can't, when it's time to bid on that, you've got to have that in, and there are multiple conventions right now that we are in those discussions with, and they are saying, what kind of commitment are you willing to make sure we choose your city over others? And y'all are aware of a few of them. You read them in the newspaper also. And so we felt like that was the right number. Came from the governor's office, and we talked through it, and it felt like the right number for a special event pilot program.
Right, thank you. Representative Sparks, final question. We're running late, but as you can tell, Commissioner, there's a lot of interest in what you and your department do.
Thank you.
Representative Sparks.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all appreciate our parks. I know I do. Wanted to ask, as far as marketing long range, I brought this up to Tennessee Parks, Bryson last week, I believe it was. Have y'all explored VR technology, virtual reality technology, to where, as far as marketing, there may be some young people in the crowd here that know what I'm talking about, where I hear David Hawk and other people talk about their community. Well, I can't, it's difficult to be there. I think Ryan Williams brought up the schools coming up for field trips is difficult for rural folks. But with the VR technology, you could, in the classroom, you can almost be there. And it's pretty interesting stuff. Met with Motlow College the other day, and a Labaki, a company that does VR development, software development, and training videos. And they're also using it for like Medgar Evans, in Mississippi. They partnered with the National Archives and to do this video. But it's really some fascinating stuff. But from a marketing perspective, I think it would be brilliant for y'all long term to have that, to where it's almost a teaser to get people to want to come to some rural counties or areas that kind of put it out there, especially for our schools to reach these rural areas. And Ryan Williams, Patsy Hazelwood's, those areas, Crawford's districts that are so difficult for students to come up. Thank you for the great job y'all doing.
Thank you. It's a topic we get excited about. I can tell you that our Bill Dance Signature Lakes, again, developing that app where you can have that communication directly and that experiential piece that's going on at that lake. And Brian, you want to talk just to wrap us up?
Yeah, sure. And love all the technology that is evolving out there. We have used virtual reality headsets to inspire. In fact, a few years ago, we were at the Country to Country Music Festival in London, and had a big setup with the Grand Ole Opry backdrop and autograph signings, and had a whole bunch of those VR headsets using footage that the Country Music Association had captured here at the festival concert. And you could be on stage with Dierks Bentley, or you could be on stage with others. So I love that. And you're right, for those types of long haul markets in particular, when we can go to another city and use technology to inspire them to want and come and do it, you're right. It is neat. We've used it. We've also looked at like augmented reality technology to enhance some of the experiences when people are on site, and even other things like, projector mapping and different stuff. So great question. And yeah, as marketing folks get pretty excited whenever the technology evolves, but certainly we'll consider it for parks. And we have a great partnership with the parks and have worked probably more closely with them in the last 3 years than we ever have before, as our visitation to parks just continues to increase. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. We're well past time, and I will just take a moment for a personal order. Would like to ask you to say hello to your Uncle Roy for me and for my husband, David, who is a great friend of his and really enjoys time spent with him. So hello to him for us, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to hear next from the Arts Commission, and we would ask Ms. Pope and her team if she would come forward. The folks in tourism have left the seats warm for you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your patience. We went over time, and I apologize for holding you up like that, but we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us about what's happening with the arts in Tennessee. So if you want to just go straight into your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ann Pope, and I'm Executive Director of the Tennessee Arts Commission. With me, to my right, is Hal Partlow, Associate Director of Grants, and to my left is Associate Director of Grants, Ann Brown. Also with me is Jason Goldston, our Director of Communications and Marketing. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you how the Arts Commission works to serve the citizens of the state. The mission of the Arts Commission is to cultivate the arts for the benefit of all Tennesseans and their communities. Our requested funding for FY 22-23 is $36,685,600, which includes our regular agency budget of $11.7 million and $25 million from the U.S. Department of Treasury of the American Rescue Plan Act funds as approved by Governor Lee and the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group. Our cost increases, none of our requests affect the general fund. The first request is to raise the estimate of specialty license plate dedicated appropriations by $1.2 million. $600,000 of that would be reoccurring and $600,000 would be non. Request also includes one-time use of $1.4 million in reserves for statutorily directed purposes, as well as which would also help address increased demand for Tennessee communities, including in rural communities. Our second request is for a no-cost extension for the Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program, which is a $1 million multi-year grant from the Tennessee Department of Health. This extension will provide spending authority for the final $350,000 of the grant. The Tennessee Nonprofit Arts and Culture Recovery Fund was approved by Governor Lee and the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group for $80 million over 3 years for grants to address severe COVID-related economic harm to approximately 200 Tennessee nonprofit arts and cultural organizations across the state. Pre-pandemic, nonprofit arts and culture sector was a $1.2 billion industry supporting more than 40,000 jobs and attracting 18.6 million attendees to events annually. Tennessee's arts and culture sector was hit hard by the pandemic, with 97% of Tennessee's arts nonprofits canceling events. The first round application deadline of February 4th for the ARP money, the Commission received 167 applications with a total request amount of $96 million. We anticipate notifying award recipients in the next few weeks. We expect the next round of applications will open late this year or early next year. In FY21, the Arts Commission distributed $7.5 million to every county in the state through an open, fair, and competitive grants process. Specifically, the Arts Commission made 778 grants to over 520 different grantees in all 95 counties. A strong system of results reporting and grants monitoring assures public accountability. Demand for our grants remain to be high. We have provided a list of the 2021 grants by county. This information speaks to the breadth and scope of the work of the agency. The Commission has invested in nonprofits, local government entities, and schools all across the state. The Commission invests in the arts and culture infrastructure of the state to improve quality of life, economic vitality, and tourism. On the slide are examples of nonprofits that conduct activities and programming that attract audiences and also who provide other services for their communities. I'd like to highlight two programs. The Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program aims to improve quality of life and care for residents in 147 of Tennessee's nursing homes through the use of individualized music for nursing home residents, including those nursing home residents who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. If you have nursing homes in your district that are interested in getting signed up for this program, please let us know. Additionally, the Commission has a new program through our Creative Placemaking program, which is our Rural Arts Facilities Fund, which is built upon our successful Creative Placemaking model. This grant program will provide matching grant assistance for rural communities to help build, renovate, or expand arts and culture facilities. On behalf of the Tennessee Arts Commission, I want to acknowledge the support of this body in providing funding and support that allows the Commission to serve the citizens of the state and strengthen Tennessee communities through the arts. I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Director Pope. We appreciate you being here. Again, I have a vested interest in this to some degree. I have a stepdaughter in Chattanooga who runs an arts organization. So I know how crippling all of that was during the pandemic, because most of these organizations get their funding from large events, one annual events and that kind of thing, which obviously could not happen under pandemic circumstances. So the dollars that the grants provided really kept a lot of these organizations afloat so things could get back towards more normal, and we do appreciate that. You mentioned the music programs. Can you tell us how many nursing homes currently participate in the program and what we're doing? Obviously it's incumbent upon us to sit here to go back to our communities and make sure that our nursing homes know about them, but how do we advertise those programs? I've read a little bit about their effectiveness, which seems to be really pretty amazing in some cases. So what are we doing to make sure that we are having as many nursing homes participate in that as possible? And where are we now in terms of numbers?
Well, let me go to the numbers first. We are currently in 67 nursing homes and who are participating, affecting 38 Tennessee counties. We have 326 nursing home residents that are currently participating, averaging 9 residents per facility, with 143 nursing home staff trained, and involving 283 family members who also are involved. As far as what we are doing to market the firm, the program, we do have our marketing director who is here, Jason Golston, who, if you want to come to the table and add to what I'm about to say, we do it online to the nursing homes. We have through the Tennessee Hospital Association, they had their annual conference. We had a booth there and got a lot of interest there. We do pamphlets. We reach out directly. We have a number of a number of other things that we do to market directly to nursing homes in partnership with the Tennessee Hospital Association, as well as the Tennessee Commission on Aging. And Jason, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Jason Goldston, Director of Communications and Marketing. No, Ann, you covered it pretty well. That's exactly everything that I had listed that we have been doing in the marketing and communications in order to reach out to all of the nursing homes across the state.
All right, thank you. Next on my list, Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, thank you for being here. My question is about y'all specialty license plates. Looks like this year y'all requested a total of about $2.6 million from reserves for the ART grant program. I just want to know how many grants y'all plan on using this year, and then I've got a follow-up question after that.
Yes, Representative. We requested 1.4 million, 1.2 million that actually is raising the estimate for the annual sales for the license plate. And then we are asking for 1.4 million in use of one-time reserves. Yes, sir.
Representative.
So is that combined, or how much will
yes,
the
sir.
grants? How much will y'all be awarding? Or do you have an estimate?
Last year we granted 7.5 million in grants to every county in the state, to over 500 different grantees.
All right. Thank you so much.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Pope, great to have you here. Thank you so much. She's trying to find me up here, I can tell. Let's talk a little bit about the American Rescue Plan dollars that you mentioned. You said 167 applicants. The due date was February 4th, and they have sent requests for $96 million. You mentioned that we've got $80 million available.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to spend all that $80 million, or are we going to invest all that $80 million in these grant applications? And what will the process be? Hopefully, each of the applicants, if worthy, will receive some dollars. So if you could walk us through the process that you're going through right now in delineation of that $80 million.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. We received applications. We are going through the process right now with we received grant requests from 168 and so what we've done is we've our existing staff have created an allocation process and standardized contracts. That working with CPO on that. We finalized detailed grant guidelines, designed new and built new forms in our online grant system management system. We conducted extensive outreach to eligible applicants, and resulting in 168 applications. We then, our existing staff conducted standard checklist reviews for completeness and compliance, and prepared risk assessment to inform grants monitoring. We using the existing panel review protocols, staff organized and trained a panel of external financial reviewers with nonprofit accounting expertise who conducted technical reviews of the accounting support for pandemic loss according to a standard rubric which we developed. Any issues identified are currently being addressed and resolved. We anticipate notifying recipients in the next few weeks. And then applicants will revise their budgets to match the awarded amounts, and contracts will be generated in bulk and routed for digital signature sometime in April. The payment process will begin shortly thereafter. We then expect in the next round of applications will open later this year or early next year.
Chairman Hawk?
Thank you, ma'am, for good follow-up. Uh, So tell me again, we're looking at, is there going to be another pool of money made available? Or are we still talking about not spending the full $80 million in this first round? Or is there going to be another pool of money available? And as you're talking about looking at these, if you could answer as well, it sounds like you're able to do this with existing staff, but you've had to bring an outside independent organization in. Are they charging us anything, or is that just the cost of that as we're looking at the budget? So 2 questions are we going to spend less than the $80 million we've got in this first round, and what will the next round of investment be? And also just the cost of doing it within your department.
We were allotted 30 million in the current fiscal year to get 30 million out the first year, and then 25 million in the next year, and then the final 25 million in the third year. And then as far as the cost, we brought in financial experts that had expertise in nonprofit accounting practices from arts and cultural organizations, who took a certain number of applications. We divided up the 168 applications, and we paid each one of those recipients a $2,000 honorarium for their number of applications. Additionally, we have of that 80 million, we have in the budget is 100,000 each year for monitoring and accountability on the back end.
Chairman Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question related to the $60,000 grant to make grants available for nonprofit arts, senior service, or community organizations and governmental entities offering art learning to seniors. Funding for these projects is occurring between August 1st of last year and June 15th of this year, I believe. How many programs have actually taken advantage of this funding so far?
I'm not sure exactly what $60,000 program.
National Assembly of
Oh,
State
yes.
Arts
Do you
Agencies?
want to answer that, Ann?
Ann Brown, Associate Director of Grants. I believe, and I can get you the exact number, about 20 nonprofits or local governments have applied for that. I think it's, we call that the Arts Access Mini Grant or the Creative Aging Grant 2.
Yeah.
Yes, but I can get you that information.
Okay, just if you can get it to our chair, I would appreciate that. Are programs, program outcomes being measured?
Yes. Yes, sir. And just an additional point to add, that funding was through that's some national, that funding that came through a national foundation as well as other nonprofits. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Will you be working with the Office of Evidence and Impact to evaluate the effectiveness of the art grants?
In that particular category? Do right here.
Thank you.
Got it.
Am I on? Yeah. Hal Partlow, I'm the Associate Director for Operations. Yes, we do work with the Office of Evidence and Impact on all our grant programs.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Representative Sparks?
Yeah, real quick. You mentioned music therapy. I've shared with this committee and other committees. I've got a sister in a nursing home that had a severe brain injury. She was singing a song. This is where I think this stuff is powerful. She was singing a song, Country Road, Take Me Home. She was trying to get out of the nursing home. She was trying to escape. And I walk up, she didn't know who I was, but she knew the words of that song. And that's where James Dunn, I know he's passionate about this as well. Last week I had a resolution music therapy week. Monroe Carroll sent some folks up where they work with music therapists in the hospital. my friend JT Cooper works with a group called Warrior Rounds. They help songwriters in Nashville, and they work with veterans. I really think when we look at what we're spending and the suicide rate and the depression and that at an all-time high, I think everybody would agree. I really think this music therapy, I'd have never thought I'd say this 5 years ago, but I really think there's something there for healing. And it's something we can all agree on. So I appreciate any attention y'all can bring to that and working with veterans and these young people. And even in our prisons, when 60-70% of that's mental health and addiction. So I think there's something there to really help heal and get our costs down. So I see it as an investment. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. And again, we apologize for our tardiness in getting to you. Thank you for your patience. And we appreciate the work that you do. Arts, oftentimes we used to talk about an organization that I was part of that was the last to get funded and the first to get cut. And too often the arts falls into that category. So I'm glad to see and to say that we intend to have a commitment to the arts, and we've kept that even through a very difficult circumstances with the pandemic and all the other things that have occurred. So thank you for what you do to keep the arts organizations keep their heads above water during difficult times across the state. So we appreciate again your being with us, and we will release you, and we will ask Mrs. Paul and the folks with the Lottery Association to be moving forward. Well, good morning. It's always good to see you and have run into you in the hall a few times during sessions. So I'm glad to officially welcome you to the Finance Committee and look forward to hearing all you have to tell us about how the lottery has fared during the past year and even sometime before that with the pandemic, and how the sports wagering has impacted lottery proceeds, if at all. So with that, we will just ask you again, welcome, and ask you to get into your presentation.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. With me is Andy Davis, who has been our Chief Financial Officer since day one. We've both been here about 18 years and have truly enjoyed all of the opportunities that Tennessee has given us to make the lottery as successful as it has been. Since we began in 2004, our total revenues are over $25 billion now. Revenues from games that are only sold in Tennessee, our instant games, cash 3, cash 4, et cetera, have been $22.5 billion of that. Our multi-jurisdictional games, Powerball, Mega Millions, are only $3 billion of the $25 billion. Since inception, we've raised $6.2 billion for the educational programs that we fund. Over 1 million students have had the opportunity to benefit from those programs. For the 10-year period ending in 2021, gross revenues have increased at an annual rate of 5.8%. Since our first full fiscal year in 2005, the profits from our instant games, which represent over 80% of our revenues, have doubled. We've gone from 153 million to 365 million in the fiscal year. For the 10-year period ending 2021, Lottery for Education proceeds have grown on an average of 5.6% annually. For the current fiscal year, our total gross ticket revenues were $1.38 billion as of March 5th. Tennessee-only revenues were $1.25 billion as of March 5th, obviously the vast majority of that. We don't know exactly how much sports wagering has impacted us because it started in the middle of the pandemic. So when you combine what would have been the effect of the pandemic on us with sports wagering starting at the same time, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly where we are. However, we have, as I said, grown on an average of 5.6% since we began, and we're at about 2% this year. So we're up some. The total sales of lottery tickets last year were 2 billion. Sports wagering was 2.3 billion. We returned approximately $500 million to the Lottery for Education account and after school programs, and they returned 32 million. So while the sales are about the same, the difference in profits for Tennessee citizens are 500 million to about 32 million. So with that, I will turn it over to Andy Davis, who will go over projected numbers for the year, and then we'll both be happy to answer any questions any of you might have.
Good morning. Good morning. Is it on? There we go. I'm sorry. Andy Davis, Chief Finance and Information Systems Officer for Tennessee Lottery. For fiscal year 2022, our gross ticket revenues, as Rebecca mentioned, is in three major categories: Tennessee instant games, Tennessee only draw style games, and our multi-jurisdictional games. Instant games revenue this year is projected to be about 85% of our estimated revenues, with gross revenues between 1.72 to 1.78 billion this fiscal year. We plan to launch about 55 new instant games this year from a $1 to a $30 price point. Tennessee only draw style games, Cash 3, Cash 4, Tennessee Cash, and Keno to Go represents about 8% of our estimated revenues this fiscal year, with gross revenues projected at 168 to 173 million this fiscal year. Multi-jurisdictional draw style games, which is Powerball, Mega Millions, Lotto America, and Cash for Life, will represent about 7% of our estimated revenues this year, with obviously the largest driver of those games is the jackpot size. Gross revenues estimated 155 to 163 million fiscal year 2022. Gross ticket revenue estimates between 2,050 million to 2,116 million this fiscal year. Expenses for this fiscal year, the largest being prizes. Our prize is going to be between 1.23 to 1.27 billion as prize expenses fiscal year, with instant games prizes as percentage of lottery proceeds at about 68%, and then all of the draw style games are approximately 50% of ticket sales. Retailer commissions as a percent of gross revenues is at 6.5% by statute, and that'll be projected between 133.7 to 138.1 million fiscal year 2022. Our major gaming vendor fees, which is IGT, who provides the systems and terminals at retail of our 5,000 plus retail locations, and then Scientific Games, who does instant game printing and distribution of instant products to our retailer base, and the Bunton Group, which is our advertising, retail merchandising, and sponsorships. I project for this fiscal year for that to be about 2.7% of gross revenues, or about 50.1 million for the fiscal year. Our administrative costs is all of the costs of doing business. We're budgeted at 23 million this fiscal year, which is about 1.2% of gross revenues. And then our education funding this fiscal year, we project net lottery proceeds between 468 to 482 million. And our after school program proceeds resulting from unclaimed prizes, we're projecting about 18 million this fiscal year for that funding. For fiscal year 2023, as Rebecca talked earlier, we are projecting conservatively about 2.5% growth for fiscal year 2023. And obviously, that will provide a range between 476 to 493 million for fiscal year 2023. That's the highlights of our budget presentation, and willing to take questions.
Thank you both for a very succinct presentation. We do appreciate that here. And Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for your comments and for providing us with these numbers. I'm sure you're aware that the governor is proposing increasing the amount awarded with the Hope Scholarship, and that's going to increase fiscal demands on corresponding funds. So I was wondering, Ms. Paul, if you might have a projection on whether you think that revenues from the lottery will maintain at the levels that they are and continue to grow at 2 or 3 or 5% a year, something like that.
Well, at this point, Mr. Chairman, the industry average growth has been about 2% a year, and we've always outdone the industry growth about double. So, as I said, we've been at 5.6% in proceeds for the last 10 years. We work very hard to continue to provide the types of games that the players tell us we like. We do focus groups. We work on committees to design multi-jurisdictional games. So we certainly would hope that we could keep revenues steady or at a minimum of 2% growth moving forward.
Okay. More.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you. And I know that you said that the pandemic and online sports gaming began about the same time, so it's hard to differentiate the two. But what's your sense of what the effect of sports gaming will be long term? I mean, do you think that it will have an impact long term on lottery proceeds?
I think the biggest problem for us in relationship to sports betting is that sports betting can use debit and credit online, and we can't use debit anywhere. Our statute says you must use paper or coin currency, and as you get younger people who don't carry cash, it becomes harder and harder to sell lottery tickets even at the point of sale. So I think the inability to do debit or sell online, which is difficult to do if you have paper or coin currency, that it's more the inability of us to compete on a level playing field than necessarily the products themselves.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I just was reading the other day, I think, and just had a quick question. There seems to be a push or a desire for the lottery to go outside the United States and incorporate other lotteries internationally. I guess we statutory hadn't provided for that. I didn't know whether the lottery board can do that on their own or whether there's any discussion about us trying to partner with other nations as it relates to those dollars and what any impact it might have financially if we were to do it.
Well, it's not the Tennessee Lottery. It's the multi-lottery jurisdictional game called Powerball.
Mm-hmm.
And Powerball has grown as they've increased the population base.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, tickets are sold in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and places that are not traditional U.S. states.
Mm-hmm.
So the discussion is to add to the 48 jurisdictions that currently sell Powerball, Australia, and England. So it would just be an additional state selling, just like New York or California or Florida,
Mm-hmm.
all of which participate in the Powerball game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a multi-jurisdictional decision that we either drop out of Powerball or we do what the multi-jurisdictional product group votes to do. So impact will only help us grow bigger jackpots quicker.
Mm-hmm.
As we had this discussion in the multi-jurisdictional game, I said, I thought the folks in Tennessee would rather have somebody in England win than a Yankee.
Depends on if they're related to us, I suppose. But no, I think it's interesting to do that. Obviously, we would get there quicker, but the perception, maybe not the reality, is that it is something that's based in the States. But I was unaware of the Virgin Islands and others that you stated. So it is interesting. I just didn't know if there are issues abroad that have to do with monies. And of course, we're seeing UK do a lot of sanctions as it relates to other folks. And so anyways, I just read that and I knew very little about it. And so I knew that you would be the person to know. So thank you very much.
Just a a follow-up on your comments about, I guess, the challenges for the lottery going forward with, and you make a strong point about the debit card, which I hadn't even thought about, but my son, it drives me nuts. He never carries cash. I mean, they just don't. And so you have a whole population that would, as you say, would be very difficult for them to buy a lottery ticket should they even choose to. So, that's one issue, the debit card, but help me understand how you could go about selling lottery tickets online. How would you even make that possible?
Well, there are, the vast majority of the world has online sales of lottery products, and about 10 US states do online lottery ticket sales. So if there's a big Powerball jackpot, rather than going and waiting in line, you would go online to, for example, the Georgia Lottery website, and you set up an account and you purchase a ticket and you choose your numbers. And then most of the jurisdictions that do online sales then will, because they know who you are, because of your account that you set up, if you win, they just deposit the money straight into your account. So you don't even have to come and claim, unless it's over a certain amount where the security rules require that you come in and claim in person. Or for example, when you order from, I don't do this, but Uber Eats or those places or that deliver groceries, when you order your groceries, you could also have them put in $5 worth of lottery tickets if you wanted. So you could have your lottery tickets delivered with your groceries. And that's happening right now in New Jersey and in Illinois.
And the cost, I assume there'd be technology and things to put in place. Do we have any idea of what that cost might be?
Mr. Davis.
Well, generally, the cost that we incur is a percentage of revenue. Our current contract with our gaming system vendor is a percentage of sales at 1.19% of sales. So basically, they would be providing the technology on the central system that they currently have in place. They just add that additional component onto their central system processes.
In a timeline, if the legislative body determined that was something they would want to pursue, how long would it take to get that up and running?
About a year.
All right. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm interested in this too, the whole credit card and debit card. How many states allow people to do that?
44. There are only 4 jurisdictions out of the 48 that don't allow debit.
So when the lottery was set up, is this something in our Constitution, or is this something in rule, or is this something in law that you can't do that?
Enabling legislation, not the constitutional amendment, just the enabling legislation.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So let me clarify. So all it would require is enabling legislation to make that change. That's what you're saying? So,
yes.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions? We've definitely given us a lot to think about. I know the administration, and I believe most of the body, the General Assembly, is very committed to increasing the Hope Scholarship now that we have the Tennessee Promise on a sound footing, because even though we've held tuition static for our students in Tennessee, there are other costs that have increased, and it's been a long time since we've increased the amount of the Hope Scholarship. So it's good to know that the work that you all are doing, make sure that the money will be there to provide the scholarships for those students. And it has made a difference, I know, in lives in Tennesseans. So thank you for managing that process so well, and for these doubling the growth on an annual basis with based on other states' accomplishments. I don't know that anybody else could come to us in front of us and say that they've done that steadily over the last 10 years. So thank you again for your hard work. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have our Honorable Secretary of State who is with us next on our agenda this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to appear before you and your committee. I have to my immediate right Mark Goins, our statewide coordinator of elections, and making his final appearance in a budget hearing before either chamber is Chuck Sherrill, our state librarian archivist, who will be retiring in between now and the next fiscal year. So want to take the public opportunity to thank him for the tremendous job he has done in leading the library and archives. So I tell this story whenever the position became vacant a few years ago. We had hoped he would apply. He did apply. He was the head librarian down in the city of Brentwood. He looked for every reason possible not to take the job. And as he kept raising objections, I said, he said, well, I need to come see you. And I said, no, I want to come see you. And I went down to the city of Brentwood's library, and I pulled up in the parking lot. And I don't know how many of you have been to the city of Brentwood's library. I pulled up and I walked in the doors, and I said, oh my gosh, we'll never get him. But anyway, somehow or another, we convinced him to come. And our library and archives and our preservation of our state's history is better as a result of Chuck Sherrill's service. So I really have about 4 things to mention to you this morning. You know that we do not typically make budget improvement requests, but with the advent of more and more states and counties, we're among 40 plus states right now trying to figure out how to preserve digital records. We've come up with a plan for that, and we made a budget request, and the governor has put it in his budget of $553,718 in year one, and a recurring appropriation of $332,834 each year. The second thing I will mention to you is you may remember last year, Representative Holtzclaw had a bill that reduced every fee that charitable organizations pay to our organization down to $10. We saw that we were running a pretty sizable surplus, frankly, in our division of charitable association gaming. You, in your wisdom, passed that legislation and returned $1.9 million to charitable organizations around the state of Tennessee. We still have a surplus, albeit a little smaller, but we believe we can do this one more year. And we've asked Representative Bricken, and he agreed to carry a bill that would reduce it again for one more year and keep that fee down at $10, which will return over $2 million to charitable organizations around the state of Tennessee. The next thing I will mention that's not shown in this document is we have asked the administration to consider taking some one-time money and putting it into election equipment. We have some Help America Vote Act funds that we can use to help counties make the transition to verified paper audit trail technology. This is something that Mark Goins and I have frankly been trying to lead counties into doing for quite some time. We're going to put $22 million in. Hopefully the administration is going to put $15 million in, and we're going to move to verified paper audit trail in all 95 counties. I'll have to tell you, the counties have been resistant to that over the years. Part of that is financially, and it's not a distrust of DRE technology, but what we find ourselves in a situation of is that less and less states around the country are using DREs. The marketplace has moved away from that. And so, you know, if you were to get a BlackBerry, your BlackBerry might, or I should say an iPhone 5 might still work, and you can make a phone call and you check your emails on it. But whenever you go to the Apple store, and you say, hey, I need some help with this, doesn't seem to be working correctly, they'll say, yeah, we don't service that anymore. And so we're really trying to make sure that we stay up to date on technology and stay competitive in the marketplace. So we have those issues. The fourth thing I would mention to you is that, and the counties, there are 4 metro libraries, Knoxville, Nashville, Memphis, and Chattanooga, that you last year appropriated through the governor's budget $3 million, $1.5 million recurring, $1.5 million non-recurring. Obviously, in this year's budget, there is $1.5 million recurring that you said should be recurring in last year's budget. I do know the 4 metro libraries are probably going to be contacting you if they haven't already about trying to get that additional $1.5 million somehow back into this year's budget. The Senate did pass and did have a motion and a second and approved that in their Senate hearing. So that's something I would just ask you to consider, that they use those dollars to purchase materials and technology for those 4 metro libraries. So those are the 4 things I have for you, Madam Chair. I'll be glad to yield to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. A lot to digest there, and we do have questions, beginning with Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
ma'am.
And everyone else, thank you for being here. And just before I ask the questions that I was going to ask, the audit trail voting machines, is that similar to the machines that we use in Wilson County?
Yes.
Are-
Do you want to talk about that?
Mark Goins, Coordinator Relations. Well, it depends on which legislation that y'all pass, if you pass anything. So there's various bills. There's at least 7 different proposals out there, including a caption that may have an amendment. But the one that's moved so far on the House side is Representative Bricken's bill. And what it would allow, certainly the type that you use in Wilson County, which is a ballot marking device, meaning that it's a paper ballot system, but the machine marks the ballot for you based on the selections that you place. And then the ballot is printed and you place it in a scanner.
You look at
You look at it, you're able to see it. Representative Bricken's bill would also allow hand-marked paper ballots, which is what you have in Hamilton County currently, where the voter comes in and marks the ballot and it's placed in a scanner. His bill would also allow for equipment that, like you have in Putnam County, which is a machine that you would electronically choose the votes, but simultaneous with that would be a printed document that kind of looks like a receipt that's under a glass that you can see as you're casting your vote who you've actually voted for. So if that's the piece of legislation that passes, then yes. There's another bill out there that is sponsored by someone that would require hand-marked paper ballots. It would not allow the other 2 devices. So it really depends on what passes. But so far, what has been sent to finance is the bill that would allow those 3 different voting systems in Tennessee.
It's good that it allows that flexibility. We have loved our voting machines in Wilson County, I have to say, because it prints everything very clearly. You can take a look at it and then insert it into the tabulator. And of course, if there's ever a question, all of those tabulated ballots can be taken out and hand counted. And that seems very important, something voters have really, really liked in our county. So I have a question. In the governor's proposed budget, it includes $333,000 recurring and $221,000 non-recurring to establish 4 new positions to create a digital preservation infrastructure for state records. Can you provide us details on this program and the 4 new positions? And what is the department doing currently to preserve state records, and how will this process differ?
Well, thank you for teeing that up for us, Representative Lynn. I'm going to yield to Chuck Sherrill to
All right.
talk about what their plan's going to be. Chuck?
All right. Chuck Sherrill, State Librarian and Archivist. There we go. Chuck Sherrill, State Librarian and Archivist. Thank you for that question. It's a rather complicated situation. I'll try to make it brief. Basically, we are already receiving digital records from departments such as Vital Records or Attorney General's Office. We have a sort of a starter edition of a piece of software that allows us to ingest and house those records. And what this bill is asking is that we could expand that program in order to deal with the flow of records that is picking up every year. The purpose of this special software, as I can explain it, is basically if you just keep one copy of a digital file, you have no assurance when you go back to that file that it will not have degraded. And we've all, put diskettes in and found out they weren't readable, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So this software houses 2 copies of everything that you ingest, and it constantly compares those 2 copies. And if one copy is changing, if they no longer match, then it identifies which one is degrading, and it corrects that problem and overwrites the bad file with the good one. And as you get millions and millions of bytes of data, this becomes all the more important And it appears to work very well. There are at least 20 other states who are using this product. And we feel we've been working with the starter edition for 4 years now, and we feel like we understand it. We know it. It does what we need it to do. So our intention now with this request is to beef up that system and to add to it some other materials. First would be the legislative audio, our recordings of legislative proceedings going back to the 1950s, which we have some in digital and some in tape form. And we want to convert all that to digital and store it in this system. Another would be from here forward, legislative video. Instead of doing audio, we'd like to take the video that you are already creating and ingest that into the system and have that as the permanent record rather than duplicating the video and the audio programs. We also will be able to receive historical records from the public and individuals. So let's say somebody brings us their great-grandfather's World War I diary and is willing to loan it to us, but not to let us keep it. We can scan it and digitize it and store it in this system. It will be preserved and available for research, but we don't have to keep the original. Additionally, we do a lot of work with newspapers. So all of the Tennessee newspapers that we currently subscribe to on paper and microfilm, we would switch that to a digital process. We would house those newspapers and serve them up in the reading room digitally. And finally, for county records, and this may be the most important piece statewide, many counties are already creating their records in digital form, deeds and other records. In many cases, I would think I can say most cases, they are not keeping a duplicate digital copy and they don't have a preservation system that's making sure that those digital files are not degrading. So this bill would allow us to take any county's digital records, just as in the past we always took their records and microfilmed them, store those in this Preservica system, and have them available for research in the library and archives and for preservation going forward should anything happen to those original files in the counties.
Madam Chair.
Representative Lynn?
Wow, that is amazing. Are you sure you have to retire? Are you sure? That is a lot of work. I'm wondering if Mr. Secretary told you about my relative's Civil War diary that I've said forever I will bring to the library and archives, and I just haven't yet. I've said it for years.
We keep waiting for you every day.
I
Just
know. Well,
never
he
show up.
brought up a war diary, so I thought you had said something. So this, digital copies of things takes up a lot of memory. Do we store the data on site, or is this all cloud-based? Where are all these images stored?
It is cloud-based and very secure.
And are we keeping, I presume that we're keeping the original documents when they are given to us and we have access to them?
Yes,
Or
any originals that we are given for anything, any state record that has an RDA requiring that it be kept permanently, we still keep the permanent paper record.
And Mr. Secretary, what do you expect the recurring expenditures to be from these improvements that you're making?
I believe
And it certainly sounds wonderful.
$332,000, yes, $332,000 annually.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, well, I'll ask my question later. We'll go to Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. Obviously, I've gotten to see Mark Goins probably more this year than I've ever gotten to see him in elections subcommittee. So we've been talking a lot about elections and voting machines and the like. I just had a quick question about the Help America Vote Act and those monies. There were 5 counties, I think, that were supposed to originally benefit from those machines or some purchase of machines. Were there any supply chain issues as it related to new machines regarding those 5 counties, or no?
I'm not aware of any supply chain issues that we've had in purchasing voting equipment. Are you, Mark?
No, we've had some supply chain issues, but it's not been with voting machines. At this point, we could, but not at this point.
Okay, you also communicated earlier about the $22 million plus I guess it was $15 million we've asked from the state to try to help avert any local costs as it relates to legislative change, to be able to have a voter paper trail. I know that this committee has a bill in front of us that would help do that. Are there any things the legislature can do to help ensure, other than funding, that this process goes forward? And are you comfortable? I think it's Representative Bricken has a bill that allows for this verifiable paper trail. Are there any other things that maybe we hadn't seen that we need to be paying attention to?
That's a great question, Representative Williams. Number one, you're right. Representative Bricken's bill would accommodate that. Number two, frankly, you have in the past given us great laws that have lent itself to voter integrity and voter confidence. So, if you're asking me right now what I could say you could go and do that could yield even greater confidence, I don't know necessarily what I would point to right now. Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
If there was one area of enhancement, I do like where we are as far as the laws. The laws are great, but I think we could enhance the audit procedures that we have.
Thank you.
Other than that, and there's some the issue with audit legislation, there's several bills out there that accomplishes different things. And so it's been very difficult to figure out which is the right path to go. Obviously, that's the legislature's prerogative, but I think there could be some confusion out there because there are different avenues to go as to which may go. So you're going to see a lot more of me over the next couple of weeks. But I think that's one area. But other than that, I mean, I really do think y'all built the right legislative framework for us to be successful. And we continue to get recognized for some of the things that we do, including last week, Representative Shaw was included in a panel that was Strong Elections, Strong States. And we were included in that Strong Elections, Strong States. I was very pleased to see that.
Well, thank you. I do think it's good. We ask people all the time in my business is everybody says they do quality work, but when other people are talking about the work you do, that it's outside of your department, you're doing a great job. We do have a fantastic elections division here in the state, and other states look to us not just for how we do it, but also how we intend on leading. And so you are to be commended for that, and our local election administrators as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Glad to see you guys today, and thank you for the job you do for our state. I'm always bragging on you back home to our constituents, and I'm proud to be able to do that. I want to ask you quickly about the department's Safe at Home program, and if you can give me an update on the program and how many individuals are enrolled in that.
Well, let me go back to my notes here. We right now have 441 active participants in 38 counties, and we have 586 application assistants across all 95 counties.
If that program expands, are you going to need more money or more personnel, do you think?
No, we think we can cover what we have.
Okay.
In an ideal world, it would never have to expand because we wouldn't have to deal with this. But no, we think we've got the resources necessary to handle any possible expansion of the law.
Thank you for that. If we only dealt in an ideal world.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to shift to charitable gaming. Did the pandemic have any impact on the revenues of the Division of Charitable Gaming? And if so, have they rebounded?
Did it have an impact? Probably the greater impact, obviously, is when we reduced fees down to $10 for all filings with our office. So, but our surplus, while we reduced fees $1.9 million, we didn't see a $1.9 million reduction in our surplus. So funds still continue to come in. Something you're also going to see, though, is speaking of charitable gaming, I believe we are going to have a record number of organizations come through on the omnibus list that you're about to see come before your body. So a lot more organizations out there are applying. A few years back, you extended the deadline from December 31st to January 31st. We feel like that's had an impact, certainly on late applications as well. And we also have enclosures we put into our mailings that we send out to people, making them aware of what the opportunity is to have these types of events.
Yeah, thank you for that. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Representative.
Next on my list, Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, and
Your name was called, but he called your name earlier.
Thank you. Thank you. I was about to say that it seems like I just left these three gentlemen. Short weekend, but by the way, I do want to say how much I enjoyed the library and archives and all of the information that I was able to learn this week, because I'll be honest, I had not spent that much time there before, and you guys are doing a wonderful job. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for letting me serve on that panel. My questions around fantasy sports today, back in 2016, we established that process for the license of online fantasy sporting. And what I would like to ask is, what is the current status of the online fantasy sports operation in the state right now?
Okay, we have 8 operators. I think we have an application for a 9th one, but I hope that's correct. If it's not, I'll come back to you and correct that information. And there are, as of the end of the fiscal year, almost 125,000 Tennesseans have fantasy sports accounts.
And I wanted to do a follow-up and ask you, has there been any impact to the number of licensed operators since the initial online sporting betting started in the state?
Well, I think what we saw in the very beginning is we have companies out there that knew that they wanted to operate in Tennessee. So there was slow growth in the number of fantasy sports operators even prior to the online betting laws. So, I think we're still going to have every once in a while, possibly another one each year, another fantasy sports operator each year. But that's kind of what we were seeing after the initial, 4 or 5 that originally applied to operate in Tennessee.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do. And again, thank you for letting me spend the weekend with you.
Thank you, Representative.
On the fantasy sports betting operations, is there consolidation in that industry or potential of consolidation? We have these multiple sports bettings, but is that going to be like banking and everywhere elsewhere?
It's interesting you mentioned it. I think there's certainly that opportunity. And in fact, I suspect there's probably a lot of smaller ones that, like some community banks, open up with the entire idea that, hey, we're going to be sold in 4 to 5 years. So I think you'll see some of that. But from my perspective, certainly if you look at the advertising that's going around the state, I think this trend is certainly more toward the online betting than it is fantasy sports. When I tell you there's 125,000 fantasy sports consumer accounts across the state of Tennessee, I bet if Mary Beth Thomas were sitting here with the Gaming Advisory Council, she'd tell you there's a whole lot more than 125,000 Tennesseans who are doing online betting.
Thank you. And I have conflicting emotions about that.
I completely understand. I think what we all recognize, it's here, so, we have to make sure that we do what we can to regulate and protect Tennessee consumers.
And we do. And I think it's interesting that we have some of those monies set aside to deal with addictions that we know will result, or if they're not there already. But I will just step down from my pulpit. Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I want to step back and talk about the voting machines and the paper trail kind of thing. I know that in my county and a few other counties that we have purchased these new machines. Is there any consideration for you guys going back and maybe retro dating this to people that had bought the machines, in this year since January? Because I know you all have the money to pay for them, and it's a huge expense for our small counties, like $400 and some thousand alone in my county. And I'm really concerned about that. Has there been any consideration?
I'm aware of it, and I'm going to ask Mark Goins. I know he's had some direct conversations with your administrator of elections there. Mark?
Yeah, I can't figure out a way under the confines of the Help America Vote Act to make it work, after the fact someone's already purchased it. So the legislation that's moving forward, it would go after, people have already purchased their equipment. It is a timing issue. And I understand, from Sullivan County's point of view, we just missed this by a few months, but I can't figure out a way to do it. Having said that, 61 counties have not upgraded. Of those 61 counties, some of those have not had a second bite of the apple. So this will be additional. So basically, they're getting what Sullivan County would have gotten plus a little bit more. 45 of those counties did an upgrade a few years ago, but they didn't utilize all the funds that was allotted to them. So when it comes down to it, Sullivan County will not be getting this if the legislation passes in all candor. They will not, because of the time they purchased, they will not be getting the same share that some of these other counties got. But when you look at how the process is played out, I don't think it's going to be that much in the scheme of things. I'll have to compare the two different. Let me get more information, compare, and I can show you on paper how much it's going to be. But you have a phenomenal administrator. I wish there was something we could do, but frankly, I don't know of anything we can do under those confines that we currently are.
But Chairman, we are looking for a solution to that. So I know he's talking about the obstacles doing that, but we are looking for a solution because I agree with you. It doesn't seem, it's not fair that here you have a county that's gone ahead and made this purchase, and then the legislature may come in a few months later and come behind that and do something extra for other counties. So we continue to look for a solution.
Yeah, and then the other thing that doesn't seem, in all candor, I'm just being, putting it all out there. The other thing is there's a few counties that when they had the opportunity to get the second bite of the apple, what I mean by that, everyone had money at the onset to buy equipment, then they had another allocated amount of funds to get a second bite of the apple. Some counties chose not to go to paper, even though we had recommended it. And so that we're coming in kind of rewarding those individuals that did not take our advice, 3-4 years ago. So that's another component of it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, lady.
Thank you. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Secretary, I'm not sure exactly what you said to draw your coworker over from the library south of us, but it looks like it would be just as home or just at home in a ski resort as it would be in Williamson County. So good work. A question that I know I get asked a lot, I'm sure you do as well, on absentee ballots. And I know the rules changed a little bit through an executive order. Can you address what the rules are moving forward? And then I've got a couple of comments.
Okay, I'll try and help with that. Mark, you kind of like song from Prince. I was dreaming when I wrote this, forgive me if I go astray. But if I can, what I would say is someone in Tennessee is a state where if you want an absentee ballot, you're responsible for making that request yourself to your local election commission. You submit that request. They verify your signature to make sure that is in fact you. If it is in fact you, they in turn mail the absentee ballot back out to you. When you send your ballot back in, there's an outer envelope. They again match the signature on the outer envelope, and it has to be mailed back in. There are those drop boxes, and you're responsible for your own ballot. You are, in Tennessee, you're not allowed to go and collect somebody else's ballot and turn that in for them. So I'm not sure if that gets to your question or not.
Are there age restrictions to who can request an absentee ballot?
Well, there's an age restriction, 60 and above, but there are really 14 different reasons by which someone can request an absentee ballot in the state of Tennessee. 60 and above, typically, if you're military, you're living away from your home residence, you're going to be out of town. Those are, or if you are, if you're disabled, you're ill. Those are different reasons as well. But there are 14 different reasons in Tennessee you can use to request an absentee ballot and then cast an absentee ballot.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Secretary. One of the recurring questions I get anytime I'm speaking to a community group are college-age kids that want to make it easier for them to vote in elections back home that they deeply care about. And they find it difficult if they've not voted in an election, if they kind of fell in that odd time to vote. How do you recommend I answer, and how do you, what are you doing? What's your department doing to encourage more voter participation for that younger Tennessean that they just aren't voting in the numbers that I'd like to see them?
Well, sure. So, we do a lot of advertising, frankly, on social media or different, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Actually, we don't advertise on Twitter just because of some of the complexities and expense of that. We've done voter registration drives. In fact, Representative Gillespie was with me at the University of Memphis football game earlier this year. We're getting people to register. I think one of the things that could really encourage people to actually participate in the election is they want to know that there are candidates and there are ideas that they can be supportive of. And so to me, that's one of the things that really drives turnout. So, but we work with all 95 county election commissions, work to try and get every possible person registered. They go into high schools. We created a new Ann Dallas Dudley Award, which is really in tandem with what the law is, that election commissions right now are responsible for going into high schools and registering anyone who wants to register, who's going to be 18 by the next election. And so we're doing all those things. But also one of the things that's very discouraging to me, because I think every eligible Tennessean who can register should register, and not just register, but actually go and vote. And so one of the things we talk a lot about is having a plan to be able to go and vote. You can certainly request an absentee ballot and get that back in, and there's plenty of time to do that. What we find a lot of times is the parent of a student's a lot more interested in going to vote than the student themselves actually is. So that's something that we fight. But we really want to make sure that every eligible Tennessean, regardless of your age, has the opportunity to cast that ballot. We take that very seriously. Also something that people need to understand is that if you registered to vote online, you can still go to your local election commission and present in person, regardless if it's election day or not, to be able to verify who you are. There's also ample early voting by which people, who live in state or the nearby states can come back home and be able to register, come in and vote on a weekend. So, Tennessee is one of the states, frankly, that we feel like is easy to register and it's easy to vote in.
Thank you.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and obviously I say this all the time, but you're my favorite Secretary of State in the entire nation, and you do a great job for us here in Tennessee. So I just want to follow up on that question and say, look, when we saw kind of chaos in other states on what rules are going to be followed, how their elections are going to run, when everybody else was just struggling through the pandemic to make sure folks' ballots would be cast and counted exactly as they were cast, you guys were well ahead of the curve. I mean, you made sure that our laws were enforced here. You made sure that folks had access to the ballot. And quite frankly, it appeared to me that you bent over backwards to make sure that, just as Representative Freeman said, I mean, his constituents wished to go out and vote, and mine did in large numbers as well. And we appreciate that. And so I just wanted to say, I know that other states have had court cases that have gone against their Secretary of State since the election, indicating that they went well beyond kind of their duties. You stuck well within the bounds of where the legislature had put the laws, and I appreciate that. I also want to say that I appreciate the fact that with a lot of the online registration options and the early voting options that you all have really championed over the years, my constituents have found that extremely helpful whenever they've moved into my district or around in my district, to be able to keep their registration up to date. So I quite frankly, I think you've done a better job than the other 49 Secretary of States out there in the country of making sure that folks, if you want to vote in Tennessee, it is literally easier to vote here than just about anywhere else in the country. And I see some of these other states that will get a lot of headlines, so to speak. And instead of getting headlines, you've just been getting results. So I just wanted to say publicly, thank you very much for your efforts and your team's efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Leader.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When my colleague from Davidson County asked that question, I was wondering if maybe this is what he was getting at. My daughter turned 18. Her birthday is October 26th. So it was before the election. It was an election year. It was before the election, but after the primary. And we were hoping that she'd be able to vote because she was it was outside of the 30 days before the election to register to vote. I'm reasonably sure she voted for her mother, but I know that the law allows someone who's turning 18 to register 30 days before the election. Even though they haven't turned 18, they can still register as long as they'll be 18 by election day. And I didn't know if that's what my colleague from Davidson County was getting at, but it does allow someone who their birthday is in between that registration of the 30 days. They're really not 18, but it does allow them to register to vote. And then they have their 18th birthday, and then they can vote in the election just a few days later.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. And something else that's really important to point out that I was talking about earlier about the high school registrations. Those are in-person registrations. So that if a person registered as in person, that counts as having presented the election commission. That individual is able to cast an absentee ballot with no issue.
Representative Sparks.
Mr. Secretary, just want to tell you, Mark, thank you. And you were in my community, I guess, a year and a half ago, and it was interesting. And we visited.
It was fun.
It was fun. That was we visited New Vision Baptist Church, talked about addiction and their recovery efforts there to work in our jail 940. Visited African American Church, Stones River Battlefield. You were very attentive, and our library. So I just want to thank you publicly for your passion. You're probably the hardest working guy, I dare say, in the state of Tennessee. And anytime we text you or call you, you answer the phone. I appreciate it. And also want to just give a shout out to Alan Farley and our election commission back home for the great job they do. Thank you, sir.
He does a fantastic job. You're right. Thank you, Representative Sparks.
All right, well, I think, I'm sorry, Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be very brief. I did want to say, after spending the weekend and after serving on the panel, I am convinced that Tennessee is one of the best states in this whole United States when it comes to registering and voting, and our constituents having an opportunity to freely do that. I think it would be important for every legislator to just spend some time with you guys and to see how it's done and how easy you make it. I learned a lot of other states are far behind where we are, and I thank you all for a job well done. And I'm convinced that anybody in the state of Tennessee want to register to vote can do that, and being qualified to do that, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Representative. You know, this committee has made us a AAA state when it comes to financial matters. We're trying to do the same in elections, so thank you.
All right, well, again, we appreciate the time this morning, and Mr. Sherrill, I would be remiss if I didn't express the gratitude for this committee and this legislative body for the work that you've done for the state. I know that you're not going to be replaced. Somebody will have to try and fill your shoes, but I'm quite sure that's not going to be possible. So we may have the secretary coming before us next year with 2 or 3 slots he needs to try and replace, and we would understand, but maybe not agree. But we do sincerely. The state of Tennessee is in your debt for the work that you've done for our state, and we just wish you the best in retirement and hope that you have a great next chapter in your life.
Thank you. It's been a labor of love.
And Mr. Secretary, I want to add my personal thanks to those that have been expressed here today. There may or may not be issues across the state across this country in terms of voter integrity and election integrity. But I am personally convinced that in Tennessee, our elections are fair. I think we can prove that. I think we have proven that, as has been said already. We make it easy in Tennessee for people to vote as long as they're voting properly. So we thank you for the hard work that's been done. And I know it's been a tough year. I have referred numbers of calls to you. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And you've been very gracious to deal directly with constituents and talk with them about their concerns. And we are grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your leadership.
I see that Commissioner Gerigno is with us and waiting, so we're going to ask him to come forward. I thought for a minute he was all alone, but I see that he did bring back up. So welcome to all the folks from the Department of Revenue. This committee has a special affinity for your department as you are the stream from which our revenues come to us for dispersal. We appreciate your work in getting those dollars to us and are interested in seeing what your proposal is for your departmental budget for the upcoming year. So Commissioner Gerigno, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood and committee members. I'm David Gerigno, Commissioner of Revenue. Joining me today on my right is Amanda McGraw, our Chief Financial Officer, and on her right is Justin Moorhead, our Chief of Staff. And as always, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here before you and present our budget for the upcoming year. And Madam Chair, our proposal includes one request for a cost increase, one request to establish positions using existing funds, and one request for a reduction in appropriations. Yes. Turning to the first slide, on the first two items, I'll have specific slides in just a moment. But briefly, we're requesting $1.5 million in recurring funds for license plates, and we're requesting permission to establish 6 positions in our motor vehicle insurance verification program using funds that are already existing in that program. Madam Chair, with respect to the third item, that would be funding for a bill that the department has. Since filing that bill, we've had further discussions with additional stakeholders and decided now is not the right time for that bill. So we are not moving forward with that. I think that item will be adjusted in the governor's budget amendment. Turning to our reduction plan, this reduction also involves the insurance verification program. As we'll explain in just a moment, we're requesting a $768,000 reduction in state appropriations that fund that program. But turning first to our request with respect to license plates, Madam Chair, we issue about 1.7 million plates each year for new motor vehicle registrations. For example, if a car is purchased and needs a new plate, or a new resident moves into the state and needs to put a plate on their car, those are the types of plates we issue on a year in, year out basis. Also, for renewals of existing registrations, we issue a renewal decal. The annual appropriation of $4.1 million to fund those costs has not been increased since 2008. We're requesting a cost increase of $1.5 million to meet that need. And these funds do not actually come from the general fund. Instead, they are earmarked out of the motor vehicle registration fees. Turning to insurance verification, as you know, to reduce the number of uninsured motorists on the road, we have a program to match motor vehicle registration data that we have against insurance policy information that we receive from insurance companies. We then contact the car owners for whom we cannot confirm insurance. And continued lack of insurance can result in coverage failure fees and ultimately in a suspension of that registration. Since 2017, the percentage of unconfirmed has fallen by about 1/3, from 27% unconfirmed to 18%, but the progress has slowed over time. Currently, each week, we contact approximately 7,500 vehicle owners on a weekly basis and answer more than 2,000 calls that result from those contacts. To put that into context, that's about 375,000 contacts annually, and we currently have about 1 million unconfirmed vehicles on the road. We're requesting authority to create 6 additional positions from existing funds, which will make it possible to increase the number of contacts from 7,500 a week to approximately 12,000 a week, or 600,000 each year. In addition, we're requesting that the state appropriation dedicated to this program be reduced by $768,000. The program is funded by state appropriations as well as revenue generated by those coverage failure fees. And even with the 6 new positions, there will continue to be adequate funding in the program. So in summary, Madam Chair, we're requesting a net increase of about $730,000 and the authority to create 6 additional positions, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I apologize. I think I butchered your name. You'd think after this point in time, I would know it's Gerigno. So I do sincerely apologize.
Fine, thank you.
We do have a number of questions, and beginning with Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I want to focus on the license plates. I know that there have been issues with the vendors being able to read the new plates. Can you provide us an update on those new license plates and brief people on the issue? Also, will there be a change to the plates, or will the vendors need to make changes in order to resolve this? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We know that the current plate can be read by some, but not all of the plate readers, and it's a nighttime issue. All of the readers, to our knowledge, read the plates during the day, but there are some camera models that are currently unable or having difficulty reading those at night. And the license plate reader market is a sort of decentralized among a number of private companies with a range of different cameras. And we have been and currently are continuing to work with the Department of Safety to fully evaluate the issue to make sure that any decisions based on sort of the best information that we can have. We've been working on that and are, I think, coming close to having some direction, but we want to make sure it's fully informed direction and, that we move appropriately forward.
Thank you. Have there been any other issues with the new plates, or folks satisfied otherwise?
Yes, sir. I don't know of any other issues. I think the distribution of those plates is going well, and everything has been positive.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Commissioner, I'm sorry, I was distracted here for a moment. In the license plates issue, I heard your explanation about the license plate readers and the market, but what is the plan going forward to correct that? I think I missed the bottom line.
Well, I think we're still currently making sure we know everything there is to know. As I was saying, there's a number of different companies, a number of different models of cameras, and it's all sort of out there in the private market. And so we've had to go out and sort of learn. So we have not set a direction quite yet. We want to make sure that we're really informed, and make sure that we gather all the information we can to make the best decision possible. But we haven't quite decided that yet.
So I guess some of the options would be to reissue plates that were changed, and another option might be just to make sure that the readers are upgraded so that they can read our plates.
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I think one of the things we've learned is that, with the colored plates, there are there may not be a lot we can do short of going back to a white plate, with black letters. And so, I don't necessarily think that states broadly can be sort of restricted to that. So those are some of the nuances we're trying to determine in terms of what's the best path forward. It's not a particular problem with a particular plate so much as it is the ability to use a plate with a color instead of a white background. So those are some of the things we're working through.
Well, I guess some of the concern would be just, as time is passing, more and more of those plates every month are getting, out there on vehicles as people are renewing their registration. So
Yes, ma'am.
we look forward to some direction in terms of a solution for that. Representative Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I have, it has to do with uninsured motorists. And in 2015, there was the verification program started. And I was wondering if after this program was started, are you seeing any, I know the governor's proposal in his budget was for 6 new positions, but is the department seeing an increase in the number of uninsured motorists? Or is there just an increase in the total number of motorists in Tennessee, and the percentages of those without insurance is similar to previous years?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. I mean, certainly the number of cars on the road does continue to grow. And the number of uninsured, or, to be specific, we use the term unconfirmed because we do find that some of the registrations and policies that don't match or data issues, and those people do actually have insurance. Some percentage of unconfirmed are actually insured, but obviously a significant percentage are uninsured. But the number of unconfirmed continues to decline, but at a slower and slower rate. And that's as the number of cars go up. If you look at the period as a whole, since 2017, unconfirmed's gone from 27% unconfirmed to 18%. So you can think of that as a 9% drop, but it's really a third of the unconfirmed. A third of the unconfirmed have now become confirmed. But over the last couple of years, I think a year and a half ago, that percentage came down 1%. Last year, it came down 0.5%. So it's continuing to decline, but at a slower rate. And so it's really a function of manpower to be able to contact more people. So we want to add additional positions so that we can contact more people at a faster rate to try to continue to drive that number down.
If you can, without getting into the weeds, how do you verify it electronically? How does that work?
Yeah, it's really that the insurance companies provide us with their book of business. So, all of their policies for private passenger motor vehicles. And so we have that as a database, and we have our registrations as a database, and we use the VIN. We cross-check the VINs that are registered versus the VINs that have insurance, and generate on a monthly basis a list of VINs that have a registration but we cannot show an insurance policy.
And you may have answered this, but is there a backlog in the verifications within the program?
In the sense that there are about 1 million vehicles on the road, for which we cannot verify insurance, and we're contacting just shy of 400,000 a year. So, in a sense, that's the rate at which we're contacting people. And if we get these additional positions, we'll increase that to contacting around 600,000 of those million, so about 60% a year.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I guess of those numbers, when you contact them, what sort of success rate or how long does it take for them to get their insurance? And do we know if they get their insurance for 30 days and then discontinue it? How much of a revolving door do we have there, do you think?
Yeah. I don't know that we have data. While I'm talking, if somebody on my team has something they can add, I invite them to do that. But I think certainly, some people receive a contact for us and they actually have insurance. There's just a matching problem, and that can get resolved pretty quick with a phone call. For folks who don't have insurance, they will receive, they will either get insurance and provide that information to us, or they'll receive a second and then a third and then a fourth letter. And those subsequent letters involve them paying fees and ultimately having suspensions. And I think what was the amount of our fees last year, Amanda?
In 1.7.
So we received about $1.7 million in coverage failure fees last year. So that indicates a significant number of people who didn't initially respond, but eventually they have to, or they won't be able to renew their registration. But the fact that we're receiving those fees means that that's playing out over a period of time, and maybe they're really not doing that until they really are forced to renew. Now, how many of those, once they get insurance, subsequently drop it, and then they're just churned right back into the population of unconfirmed? I don't know that we have a number for that, but the fact that 1 million unconfirmed is difficult to move down indicates that a lot of those folks are probably getting insurance to get renewed, and then they go back into uninsured.
Thank you. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I feel a little guilty here as part of this conversation. As the commissioner will recall, it was the bill that I carried several years ago that actually sparked this conversation, because at the time we had 27% uninsured or higher, and this system was developed. And so I'm glad to hear an update on this. Really, the question I had, two questions really. One, I know we're sending out the notifications, but it was my understanding at the time that the bill passed that if someone just refuses to get insurance, I mean, obviously that is part of the rules of the road. You have to be licensed, you have to have your car registered, and you have to have insurance. I mean, that's just what it is if you want to drive in Tennessee. That's for your protection and everybody else's around you. But if you just absolutely refuse to, and you just paid those fines and said, I'm not going to get insurance for my vehicle, then they had to prove insurance before they could get the car re-registered. We didn't make everybody come in and prove insurance at the point of registration, because that just backlogs the clerk's office. But have you been able to compare notes with the clerks to see how many of these folks are coming in at the time of re-registration, even if they didn't do the notices, but then did later come in and get their registration with proof of insurance?
Leader Lambert, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but you are correct. So if someone receives a fourth notice, what they're
If you could just, for the record, identify
Justin
yourself.
Moorhead, Department of Revenue. I'm so sorry. If someone receives that fourth notice, they're essentially receiving a registration suspension. So in order to reinstate that registration, they would have to show proof of insurance at the time. I do feel like that's likely information that we could work with our vendor to determine, how often that's happening.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And if you could give me that information, that would be wonderful. And then the only other question that I have is, you mentioned, 6 positions here, but the Uninsured Motorist ID Fund has just over $12 million in that reserve. And that's in large part, I think, from the fines that have come in over the last 7 years, unless I have been misinformed as to what's built that fund up. There may be some other things that have gone into it, but I think that's primarily fees that have come in from individuals that have refused to be insured. So, and again, driving is a privilege in this state. I mean, that's the rules of the road. You have to have insurance. So instead of just 6 positions, I mean, why not go ahead and go up to the million that are out there, ping all these, and go ahead and contact these folks and make it clear. I mean, that was our intention as the legislature years ago, was for this to get this to a juncture where it brings that 27% down, not just to 18%, but hopefully eventually down to 0%, because the systems are in place right now. It's just a manpower issue. So instead of 6 positions, I guess my question is, why aren't you asking for something more like 20, since you've got 12 million in reserve sitting there that can be utilized?
Yes, sir. I appreciate the question. I think we're looking for a balance. I mean, this will be the second time we've increased the number of positions, and really the third time that we've requested a decrease in the appropriation. The reserve is built, you're right, from fees, but also the appropriation is there as well. So we're trying to sort of get those two in balance, but not move too quickly and make sure we don't overshoot something. We feel like an additional 6 right now, based on who we can likely hire and train, and get put in place is probably, we felt like the best number for this year, but we always continue to look at that. And again, this is the second time we've increased that number, and we can certainly look at it going
Leader
forward.
Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Last kind of point on this. If the 6 works out well this year, I mean, I hope at least, again, given that reserve balance and the number of uninsured drivers that we obviously still have out there, for everyone's safety, I hope that we would potentially look at increasing that again, an additional 6 or more next year. And so, I mean, I think the numbers have shown this program is working and the technology is there for it to even work better. We just need more people that's working, is what it sounds like to me. So thank you very much. I appreciate your leadership in this issue and so many others. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner Gerigno, for being here. Just to follow up, the fund balance, I think, of the disaster relief fund at the end of last year was about $3.85 million. I guess since then we've had in Waverly the floods there. Wondered what the fund balance was. Have people been able to utilize those funds at all since that period of time? Do you know?
I'll ask Amanda to address the fund balance, if that's okay. I can sort of address the utilization a little
Amanda McGraw, Chief Financial Officer. To my knowledge, that fund balance has stayed the same. I know that audit is anticipating some of those refund requests, but to date, I don't have knowledge that they've actually received any of those.
Representative Williams, it's actually, to be candid, surprisingly few people take advantage of that sales tax refund. We found that to be true over time, not just with any one particular event. We put out press releases, we use social media and those sort of things to increase awareness. When appropriate, I think we work with TEMA to piggyback on some of the things they're doing to get that information out there. But it is, I don't know how to say it, it's surprising that more people don't utilize that fund.
Right. The reason for the question for me is mainly because before Waverly floods, there were the March 3rd tornadoes. Before those, there were the fires in the Smokies. It seems like we have a great opportunity here to help give tax relief to citizens based upon these disasters, but it's almost as if the process is so cumbersome, or their insurance companies are saying, well, we're paying the taxes anyways. It's not worth putting all this paperwork together to do it. We're looking at reform right now in the way that we do claims on our highways for the very same reason. We're carrying fund balances and no one's using them, or really not paying them. And so I guess the question would be, or the comment would be, I think it would be in our best interest to provide this service to the citizens if we could find a way that makes it more streamlined or more effective, to where people can actually get these funds directly in their hands. Because I know when I was in the when the tornadoes happened here and all across the state, there was a push to try to do some kind of relief for these folks, or help offset their costs associated with disaster recovery. But in the end, much like we have a bill this year for the flood victims, it's very difficult to be able to isolate that. But I do think this is one area where we can help, even if it's a small grant per person who was devastated by a tornado or flood or something like that, to where the money is disseminated one time to one family. To me, it just seems like it'll be a much better use of the fund. Or if we're not going to use it, then just close the program altogether and do something else. But I appreciate your hard work there. It's just frustrating over the years being here that we haven't been able to use this money, and the fund balance just continues to grow because no one's taking advantage of it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I don't have any further questions on my list. So again, thank you and your team for being here. And we are very appreciative of the work that goes on in your department. As I said, we can't do the work of the state if we don't have the revenues to support it. And you all are great about helping make sure that those revenues come in are appropriately managed, and that they are, we behave appropriately toward those who aren't paying their fair share, to make sure that we are collecting the dollars that the state is due. So we appreciate again your work and thank you. And we were going to release you and ask our comptroller, who has not yet earned the title of beloved. He's just plain old comptroller.
Thank you.
To come forward. Comptroller Mumpower, we're glad to have you and your team here today, and we're especially glad that the real beloved comptroller is behind you in case we get into difficult questions that you can't answer. It's good to know that you have a brain trust with you.
That is correct. I do know well enough to bring the great beloved Justin P. Wilson with me. Comptroller Jason Mumpower for the record. Drew Hawkins, Jennifer Pfeiffer, right over here, Brian Kinsey, and Ken Morrell. Members, thank you for having us here for our budget hearing. It's always good to be behind the tax man. The legislature appropriates it, the Department of Revenue brings it in, and then we audit it. So unique timing of these things today. I am glad to say that the Office of the Comptroller, our mission statement is to make government work better, and I'm glad to say we can meet our statutory obligations within the budget as presented by the Governor's Office that is now up for your consideration. There is something unique about the Comptroller's Office budget this year. As you all know, over the past 2 years, the federal government has flooded every state, Tennessee being one of them, with billions of dollars of federal money. The moment that we accept that money, we ink an agreement with the federal government that we will audit every penny of it for as long as it is in circulation. And considering the more than $21 billion that has come to Tennessee in the past 2 years, I can tell you that our audit teams are already working on that. And you do see, I'm sure on the information in front of you, that in working with the administration, there are a number of new positions slated to come to the Comptroller's Office to help us do the work that we are committed to do, keeping up with this money. You know, not only are there federal dollars coming to the state of Tennessee, but there are federal dollars coming to every local government, every city, every county, every school system, every utility across the state. And in some cases, local governments are receiving as much as 75% of their annual budget in money from the federal government. I am glad to say that in regard to the new positions, we are able to perform the additional audit work at a cost of only 13 cents per $1,000. 13 cents per $1,000 is the cost of the new funding. And I do want to say I appreciate Deputy Governor and Commissioner of Finance Butch Ely and Director of Budget David Thurman for working so closely with us over the summer to see what was necessary. I do want to also call the members' attention to the tax relief program, which I know is so important to many of you. Now, you all know I'm from Bristol, home of the famous Bristol Motor Speedway. And in thinking about that, I'm here to kind of wave the caution flag today, because the tax relief program has been running for the past several years on an annual appropriation. And in fact, it has built up a little bit of a carry forward reserve. But I do want to tell you that in a cautionary way, the growth in the tax relief program is going to start eating into the reserve this year. And over the next couple years, and I see the chair has left, but I actually have some handouts we'd like to give to the members that are here, if that's okay, that will demonstrate what I'm talking about. And let me say that I'll wait till these. Let me say that what I'm telling you is that if there are no changes to the program, the natural growth in the number of recipients today will start eating into the reserve. There is legislation pending that would expand benefits of the program. And of course, if you choose to expand benefits of the program, it's going to eat into that reserve even more. So I'll wait till the handouts kind of make it around, and thank you, members, for handing those out for us. Thank you all. So if you look at the handouts we got, if you take this one right here first, this one demonstrates the growth in the program, and you can see over here in the column carry forward for year, which is right over here towards the end. You can see this year we're going to dip into it if there are no changes, a little over $2 million. This chart right here is one that I hope is interesting to you. You all see this chart right here. You see up there, members, it on the top chart, it illustrates how many people are in the program. You can see with the blue bar on top, you know, the tax relief is divided into two categories of participants. You have the low income, elderly, and disabled, and you see there's 83,000 low income, elderly, and disabled. And then you have 100% service-connected disabled veterans, and you have 21,000 veterans on the program. So that's how many participants. If you drop down to the chart below, you can see that even though the veteran population only makes up 20% of the participants, they utilize 2/3 of the money. And the low-income, elderly, and disabled, who make up 80% of the participants, they receive 1/3 of the funds. So demonstrating that for you there. And then I illustrate that because I've had some questions from members about what you could do to further support the different populations, particularly the low-income, elderly, and disabled. And I provided you this chart right here to tell you what it would mean financially if you increased the value limit or the income limit for the low-income, elderly, and disabled population. Ken Morrell and Brian Kinsey from our Division of Property Assessments. Ken's the real tax relief guru and expert. If you have any questions, we're happy to handle those. But otherwise, members, I'll be happy to handle any questions you have about the Comptroller's Office budget. I appreciate it, and certainly would appreciate you sending our budget out with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Comptroller Mumpower. We appreciate your comments and presentation, and we have noted your cautionary flag. We do have several folks on the list to ask questions, and the first up is Chairman Sparks.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, how many distressed utility districts are there in Tennessee, and how often does a consolidation occur?
I have Ross Colonna, our utilities specialist, here with us. I'll ask him to come down. Ross over there. Just distressed utility districts and how often a consolidation?
Hello, I'm Ross Colonna with the Comptroller's Office. I deal with utilities mainly. There are roughly 30 financially distressed utility districts currently. Consolidations, they're not something that happens super often. There's one that happened last year, and there's one happening currently, but they're not something that happens super frequently.
And Ross, if I can, I'll say not often enough.
I agree.
How about that?
Yeah.
They do not happen often enough, and we're hoping that communities will take advantage of this American Rescue Plan funding along with the state match that's being administered by the Department of Environment. And we're hopeful that we'll see more common sense consolidations in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chairman. Comptroller, thank you for being here. Good to see you and your staff. What I'm looking at is questions regarding some audit positions. I think 18 had been requested, 8 within the Division of State Audit, as well as 10 in the Division of Local Government. If I look at the numbers as of March the 12th through the Edison Staffing Report, looks like there's a total of 30 vacant positions. Looks like 15 of these were designated as legislative auditor positions. So why not reclassify these and utilize these in some of the positions that were requested? If I can spit that out.
Well, thank you for the question. That makes common sense. The first thing I would tell you is I don't believe we have nearly that many open positions today. And so I'm not sure the information you're looking at, but we do not have that many open positions today. The second thing I'll tell you is that we are heavily into our recruiting season and actually have some offers out to students that are preparing to graduate from college in May. So we're running very close to being at full employment. The positions requested today have everything to do with our new responsibilities of auditing all this federal money coming in. We're committed through 2030 or 2031 to be auditing these new dollars. So what I'm saying in particular is without these new resources, we are going to be in a position where we have multiple things that we're required to do without enough people to do them. And so we will have to begin to choose among what we're required to do, what we will do, because we have a limited staff. Drew, do you want to expand on the positions vacant today?
Yeah. Drew Hawkins, Office Managed Services. Yeah, we currently have 30, or at the end of February, we had 32 vacant positions. Only 18 of those, or only 18 of those 32 were available. We had already committed to hire individuals to fill those vacant spots.
Okay,
And we hope we are out on campuses across Tennessee and even in other states recruiting students every day. And we hope as students graduate, we will have full employment before this budget starts in the next fiscal year. I can tell you that's typically the cycle we run. This is our heavy recruiting and hiring season. So that's where we are.
Okay, and you mentioned, Mr. Comptroller, about the audits and that especially through local governments. So what will happen to these positions once the money has moved through? And I guess for a lot of the locals, as far as local governments are concerned, I guess that will be maybe 24 or 26. So what happens once those are completed? So with these positions, what happens?
Thank you. So we are a post-audit agency, which means we continue to audit after the spending has occurred. And we believe we will be utilizing every one of these positions again through 2030 auditing money that is out there. One thing, and I talked about this in my Senate budget hearing as well, and I think one of two things are going to happen. Number one, we generally have growth in our audit areas and pick up 2 positions here and 2 positions there. We believe we will naturally grow into these positions. Or the second option is, I can assure you, if we have positions that we don't need anymore, I'll turn them back in. We've done that in the past. We did that under Comptroller Wilson when I was with him, and we'll do that again. But right now, this is what we've got to have to get the work done that we've committed to do.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
again for
you.
being here.
Next up is Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you guys being here and the fine job you do for our state. I wanted to ask about some positions that are requested in the proposed budget in the Division of Investigations. And I want to know more about the caseload now per investigator within the division, and is there a backlog?
Thank you very much. Great question. And I have to tell you, very unfortunately, The biggest growth sector in my office is with investigations. We have more than 100 open investigations right now. And with the flood of money coming into the state, one thing that my director of investigations, Jeff Puckett, always tells me is that if there is money coming in, there is somebody out there looking to figure out how to steal it. And unfortunately, we find that to be true, no matter where it is. And so, yes, we have a backlog of more than 100 cases. And with this influx of money, we're already seeing an uptick, and that's where that comes from.
Okay, thank you for that. Last year's budget included $450,000 recurring to fund 3 fraud prosecution positions. Have those
Yes.
positions been filled?
Those positions have been filled many months ago, and are working great. We appreciate it, working hand in glove with district attorneys across the state. And yes.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Comptroller Mumpower. Thank you very much for the great work that you're doing. You're doing a great job answering the questions as well. Tell me a little bit about technology. I noticed in the questionnaire that you all responded to that we're going to need to make $11.8 million in technology updates. I'm assuming that's going to come from some reserves that we've built up over time at roughly $17.6 million. But if you could kind of walk us through where we are with technology, if we are going to be using reserves, as I stated, and what that looks like, sir.
Yes, our technology improvements are based on an IT carry forward. The Comptroller's Office has not asked the legislature for increased funding for IT in more than 15 years, I believe. And we do have the carry forward funds committed to these IT projects. I do want to say that just in the last month, the issue of cybersecurity and staying on top of your IT projects, especially for an office like ours, is more important than ever. You know, when we go up to New York for our bond rating hearing, one of the questions the rating agencies ask us about, one of the issues they ask us about is cybersecurity. And I can tell you, particularly with financial transactions, we are more worried than we ever have been, which illustrates the importance of some of these cyber programs and IT programs that we're working on. Anything you want to add, Drew? No.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Comptroller, for being here. You mentioned something earlier in your testimony about 20. I wrote it down with an exclamation point, $21 billion.
Yeah.
I guess and all these auditors, what we found, some of us woke up last Wednesday and we heard that the federal bureaucracy decided they want to try to claw back some of this money from the states.
Yes.
In order to pay for whatever they want to do. I don't know if they ran out of money or they couldn't print anymore. They seem to be printing it like
Yes.
crazy. So I guess my concern is there anything that we can do through the partnership with you and the Treasurer's Office that can make sure that these monies are allocated to kind of eliminate the idea that they could come back and claw these monies back? Because if we're spending all this money with local governments and auditing to make sure they're spending it correctly, and we haven't allocated the money because we want to make sure they spend it correctly, some of the numbers in that $15.5 billion spending bill. They said as much as $2.6 billion they could have clawed back out of the $21 billion from us. I guess what are we doing? Is there anything that we can do to prevent that? Because if they're already trying to take the money back now, and we're just in the throes of something that's going on in the world today, my expectation is this ain't going to be the last time they try it.
Sure. Great question. And I literally, you said you woke up to that news. I was woken up by that news from people in East Tennessee that were texting me early in the morning. You know, a couple things about that. The American Rescue Plan funds were delivered in 2 tranches. The first tranche of the money we've actually had in hand since last May. The second tranche of the money is not set for delivery until this May. So one of the first pots of money they were talking about clawing back is the second half of the money that they haven't even sent to us yet. So it would be easy for them to claw it back, although it would be tough for us because most communities in the state already have plans for that money. You know, I think that um, you can't claw back money that has already been spent. You can't necessarily claw that back. So communities are proceeding with their spending plans, but when you are proceeding with things like spending money on utilities and infrastructure, that's not an overnight spend. And so the only thing I can say about that right now is I'm glad that proposal in the United States House of Representatives fell off, and there was an immediate pushback nationwide, and they took that off. But we're going to have to be on guard about it, and we're going to have to be in communications with our congressmen and women about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I was able to get on the phone. Chairman Zachary got on the phone with his congressman. I was able to get on the phone with our congressman. It was worked out pretty quickly, but I think blue states are those who are spending their money a little bit differently than we are. I think there's a push for them to go ahead and allocate theirs in case this does come back around, because people on both sides of the aisle decided they didn't like it. But if it ever gets to the point where those in the minority, like our state, are still have money that's unallocated, I think we could be in real trouble of not necessarily clawing it back, but not ever getting that final allocation to the other half of the second part. But anyways, I appreciate the fact that you're on it. I am really concerned about this, mainly because we borrowed the money to start with, but the Tennesseans are expecting that money. And so we want to make sure we can do all we can to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize. I had to step out for a bit. And so you may have answered this question, but I know was some discussion about the audit positions requested in your budget and those positions that at least Edison shows unfilled. And I heard part of your explanation that this is the recruiting time, but I guess my question is, do we normally have that many vacancies at this time of the year, or has there been a growing level of attrition? Are you losing more people to the private sector, or what has kind of fueled the hole that we're trying to fill? Because we're not only looking for jobs for the new budget positions, but also to complete those that are already funded in this budget. So
Right.
Walk us through that, please.
Right. So the first answer is that I think Edison showed more than 30 positions vacant. In truth, today there are 18 positions vacant. I think that's normal for this time of year. We are already making offers to people graduating from college in May, and have some acceptances already and are recruiting for that every day. And we expect to be back to full employment for our audit cycle before the end of the fiscal year. The average turnover rate is about 30%. The comptroller's office is running about 7% turnover, although just like most industries, right after Christmas or at the beginning of this year, we did see an uptick in turnover. People, during this pandemic have been reevaluating their life to some degree and choosing new ventures, and we have not been immune to that. But we feel strongly that we're going to be able to recruit and fill the positions we have open today, which allow us to do the work we're assigned today. And then, if approved, we're going to recruit and fill the positions coming, because we have a lot of work to do in terms of accounting for all this money that's poured into our state.
And I guess the obvious follow-up question to that, because of the vacancies that are currently in place, has that impacted your ability to do the work that you're assigned to do?
We have definitely seen an uptick in the amount of comp time that we have had to issue to incumbent auditors. So sure, yes, but we are managing to get done and I have to commend our staff for going above and beyond and committing more time, effort, and hours to the process. But it is definitely tight, both at the local government level and the state level.
Thank you. And I'd like to switch gears and talk for a moment about the handout that you provided. And you and I had an offline conversation prior to this budget hearing today. Just, I think that you view this as just kind of a flag, a heads up that this is an issue that's coming down the road that we're going to have to address. And there's a lot of piece parts to this, but if you could just kind of give us an overview of where we stand, the projections of when this particular fund would be depleted, and how what impact that would have on reserves and so forth.
Certainly. So again, we're talking about the tax relief program here, which deals with low-income elderly and disabled, as well as 100% service-connected disabled veterans. You can see again from this chart right here, over here in the carry forward for year column. And this is important to understand, with no changes to the program, and there is legislation pending that would increase the benefits, but if there are no changes to the program, this year we will dip into the reserve a little over $2 million. And then what I'm saying is by FY 25, which is tax year 24, that's the local tax year, that's the state fiscal year, we would need more money injected into the program to keep it going. Again, if there's no changes or expansion of benefits. Right here, Madam Chair, on this chart, I talked about the fact that of the two populations on the program, the low-income elderly and disabled make up 80% of the participants. The veteran population is 20% of the program, and I'm being approximate here. But even though the veteran portion of the program is 20%, they use 2/3 of the money, whereas the low-income elderly and disabled, who are 80% of the participants, they use 1/3 of the money. And then,
Mr. Comptroller, could you, just for the benefit of all of us and for those watching, just kind of explain the reasons for that, the differences in the program that results in that, the 80-20 rule?
Sure. Well, the thing that separates that is, in order to qualify for the program, the low-income elderly and disabled, they have an income limit, meaning they cannot earn more than the limit today is $31,600. And so to qualify for the program, they can't earn more than that. And then as of today, they receive, if they qualify, they receive relief on the first $30,000 of their property. Now that contrasts with the veteran population of the program, who have no income limit, and then receive currently relief on the first $175,000 of their property.
Again, I just would ask that our committee members recognize that, and while we all love our veterans and want to support them in every way that we can, I would point out that this program was originally developed to help the low income and elderly. And I think it's going to become even more of a problem, and we're watching property values in Tennessee escalate to unheard of levels. If you're a person living on your Social Security check and you're under this $31,000 limit, your $50,000 house, when you get your next assessment, it's probably going to go up significantly, and you have that limit on the amount of property relief that you can get. Our veterans, the limit is, much, much higher, as we have said, and our veterans we are continuing to have, more folks. Hopefully, we're not being engaged in any more wars or conflicts that will result in disabled veterans. But somebody mentioned earlier that we don't live in an ideal world, and so that's probably not a realistic dream. But I did just want to point out to this committee and to those that might be watching, members of this body, while we, again, want to support our veterans in every way that we can, we also have, I believe, a debt to those low income and those elderly Tennesseans who have worked their whole lives and, are now in the situation that they really are financially strained. So I think we're going to have to balance that. And as we consider adding things to the program, adding people to the program, or other ways that impact the the finances of this program going forward, because for every increased benefit that we provide, there is an increased cost. And as we can see here, everybody just, it's very plain in front of you. We have reduced that reserve, and we will be dipping into, we'll be in a negative situation very quickly. So again, just something that all of us to consider as we look at legislation that's proposed or will be proposed. And I'm sorry, Mr. Comptroller, I
in
interrupted you.
keeping with that, this third chart right here, because I have had inquiries, Madam Chair, just like you talked about what would it mean if you wanted to increase the benefit for the low-income, elderly, and disabled. Right here on top, you see some what-if scenarios if you raised the property value limit, and down here at the bottom, what it would mean if you raise the income limit in terms of an expanded population, how many dollars we approximate that would mean. So that is there for your use.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Just I appreciate all the data. I think it's really telling too, to look at them in contrast, because I don't think we ever looked at them together. We passed bills based on them separately. I guess the question is, can you have your folks run a formulary that sees sees what the trajectory of those two graphs would look like if we did make the actual first value the same? For instance, raise the low-income families the first $50,000, and then the first $50,000 on veterans. To me, it seems like that what's making it so egregious is the difference between the first 30 and the 175,000. So, if we're going to give somebody the benefit of some tax relief, that seems to me like it's the more fair way to do it going forward. That's sustainable, because obviously we're not going to be able to do that. And then secondly, can you provide that at a later date? And then secondly, do you feel like, based upon the data that you've gotten here, that this has turned into a relocation incentive for veterans? Meaning, do you think more people are moving to the state because we do give a tax or this credit on $175,000 property value?
First off, Ms. Representative, thank you. And when you say we all get that together, the y'all is sitting right here.
Yeah.
His name is Ken Morrell,
Yeah.
and he might even be able to answer this to some degree as he's sitting here. But as for a relocation incentive, I don't know that we can answer that. Of course, a lot of this veteran property tax relief is centered in Montgomery County and around Fort Campbell. And that community, and those servicemen and women who may not be from Tennessee but serve at Fort Campbell, and then when they're done with their service, figure out a place to live. I can't say that it's not an attraction, but I also can't say that it is. Ken, what about the first question there? And we can certainly put this on paper and give it to you later, but is there anything you'd say off the cuff?
Well, certainly we can produce a graph that shows if both categories of recipients were at a $50,000 value limit, what that would look like. Be happy to do that. In terms of whether that's an incentive, the comptroller is correct. We can't really answer that. Although, based upon a study I did a number of years ago, there are many states, probably most states, I suppose, that have programs that provide benefits, like this, and they take different shapes and forms, and they don't all look like this one does, but it's not, Tennessee's not unique in providing property tax relief benefits to these types of individuals.
Ken, what is the total dollar amount of tax relief benefits we're paying out today?
For the last year of complete data that we have, we spent $40,589,043 for that. That was tax year 20 fiscal 2021, and that's the top row, basically, of this page titled Property Tax Relief Multi-Year Projections.
And members, I want to point out, as to the comptroller's office, any money you appropriate for tax relief is a complete pass-through in my office. We do not take any of it for the administration or staffing costs. All money you appropriate for the tax relief program is used for tax relief purposes.
Chairman Williams.
Well, I really appreciate that. I think that if you looked at the 5-year trajectory says that if it follows the same path, it's going to be $55 million pretty soon. So I think it's incumbent upon the members to understand that this is something either we have to have the willingness to fund additional dollars or we've got to relook at the benefit. So appreciate your testimony today.
And to point out that those relief dollars are not to the state. State doesn't have property tax.
Right.
So these go to the 95 counties in Tennessee.
These are state tax dollars used to pay local government property taxes. So it's a transfer of state tax dollars to local revenue dollars, local tax dollars.
Again, I think there's no doubt that all of us would like to do all we can for all of these categories, but it is a matter of sustainability and being fiscally responsible. And I think it's something that we're going to have to take a hard look at in this legislature. Are there further questions? Seeing none, Mr. Comptroller, thank you and your team, and particularly thank the beloved Comptroller for making one more journey over to budget hearings in the House. We appreciate your presence.
Thank you very much.
We're going to ask Mr. Pond with the Early Literacy Foundation to move forward. You have plenty of seats to choose from as a comptroller's entourage leaves. Mr. Pond, thank you for being patiently waiting and sitting through some previous conversation. We do thank you for being here, and there's a lot of interest in early literacy in Tennessee as we're looking at education funding formula and, you know, where we should put our emphasis and our focus and our dollars. I think there's a fairly large consensus around the fact that early literacy is key to making some positive changes in educational levels in Tennessee. So please tell us how your organization is impacting that.
Great. Yeah. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time this afternoon. You're absolutely right. Early literacy is, I think, central discourse happening in the state of Tennessee as we're coming out of COVID, I think, recognizing the significance and the crucial nature of how we're meeting the needs of children across the state. There we go. For our foundation over the last several years, we've really grown our footprint in early literacy in a number of different initiatives. The first and foremost has been Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, serving currently about 286,000 children, representing about 70% of age-eligible children. We've been working with school districts to develop mobile literacy through book buses, working with caregivers through a text-to-parent app, really helping parents to have the resources and guidance they need in helping their children that learning journey. But the two things that we really want to focus on today is the kindergarten to third grade request that we have in front of this committee, and one other initiative that I think will be of interest. First and foremost is the kindergarten to third grade program, which in 2019, we saw an opportunity to meet the needs of our kindergarten through third grade students, really helping children beyond that age 5 marker where they're still in that process of learning to read, that third grade benchmark that I'm sure this committee is familiar with, in which a child is leaving learning to read to learn. And so in 2020, we began a pilot without knowing that COVID was going to be happening. We leaned into that pilot anyway because we wanted to look at efficacy around that program. We also worked with the Department of Education, recognizing that students were no longer in the classroom and we needed to resource them with as many high-quality reading materials as we possibly could. We partnered with them to serve about 57,000 students across the state. That then grew into a conversation that began in 2019 with Speaker Sexton's office around, was there a way to do this on a statewide level? We decided that doing it incrementally year over year, starting with all rising first graders and then moving to all rising second graders would be the best tactic to handle that. This past summer, we were able to serve 96 districts as well as 11 charter schools, serving almost 60,000 students across the state. This year, we'll be able to multiply that 3 times over and serve upwards of 145,000 rising first, second, and some additional third graders through this program. So summer of 2022, we're going to be expanding that pilot. By spring of this year, we should have the completed research that we had promised to the legislature around the efficacy of this program. So we'll be able to provide that probably either summer or fall of this year. Let's see, let's go ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dean just about the request and what that snapshot looks like. How do you access?
Okay. Now I'm on, maybe. Oh, I'll just talk loud. Or maybe I am. Maybe I am. Okay.
Please
Sorry.
identify yourself for the record, please.
Dean Hoskins, Vice President of the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. So before you, the request is in 2 pieces. One is a request for supplemental funding from fiscal year 22. That is for $4.4 million, which would be $2.2 million for Rising First and $2.2 million for Rising Second. And that is for delivery of a 6-book pack along with what are called think sheets or resources that go with those books, along with caregiver guides delivered into the home of those rising public school and charter school first and second graders this summer. That averages at about $25 to $26, including postage delivery that is return postage, so that we get those that are undelivered back and we then can reship them to the schools so that they can be used. That will allow us to do this summer, and then the fiscal year 23 funding, if that will come up. The fiscal year 23 funding would mirror the supplemental funding that we're asking for to do first and second grade the following summer, summer of 23. And so at that point for fiscal year 24, we would be looking at adding third grade. And then at fiscal year 25, we would add kindergarten, because that's the hardest population to identify in advance, a rising kindergartner. What we are trying to do is the money that was allocated to us in fiscal year 22 as supplemental funding that we received in July 1 paid for summer of 21. And so the supplemental funding in fiscal year 22 would pay for summer of 22 and get us back on asking for money in advance of the program. That allows us to work with the vendors earlier in the year. We've created a 21-member education advisory council. These are teachers and district leaders from across the state to work with us to make the book selection around which books would be included for each grade. And they met in November and in January of this year. We'd like to get them meeting in August and September so that we can start negotiating print cost, book cost, paper issues. We all know that we're dealing with some of those, and keep that cost per child at somewhere in the $25 to $26 range for those 6 books.
So one of the last things that I think is of interest to this committee that we've taken on as a foundation is that in 2019, traveling the state, we recognized that there were a number of regional early literacy efforts happening. It was creating a lot of silos in which those efforts had not talked to one another. So we started a collaborative this last year in September. We brought 16 different groups representing a number of organizations from across the state to begin having some conversations around how we can start rowing this boat in the same direction together. That collaborative has now grown from 16 parties to about 75. We'll be hosting sort of the 2.0 version of that collaborative this June, and looking to grow this into a statewide effort in which we can bring together all of our nonprofit partners that are working in early literacy, create some communication channels with the Department of Education as well as the legislature, so that we can be making one effort rather than numerous separate efforts. So far, we've had an enormous response from our nonprofit partners that have said that this is highly beneficial, and everyone can see that the stakes are too high for us to be doing this alone or doing it in silos. So we'll be reporting on the outcomes of this next meeting after the June meeting happens.
Thank you. And thank you for moving forward with that kind of collaborative. I know in Hamilton County, where I'm from, we have Read 2020, and actually our former county mayor and then Deputy Governor Claude Ramsey brought that program to the state level when he moved to the Deputy Governor position. So I know there's a lot of work through our United Way and our county and many other organizations. So harnessing all of those efforts and getting them going in the same direction, I think will certainly be beneficial.
Absolutely.
Chairman Williams, I believe you had some questions.
Yes, thank you guys for coming. I always remember the day when we got our books in the mail from our kids. Now they're grown, doing their own stuff. But anyways, it's exciting. I guess the question is, one of the things I always like to know is how many, I don't think you mentioned this, how many people does this serve? I mean, how many students are actually receiving books currently in the state?
Yeah, so through the Imagination Library, currently, we're serving 286,000 children across the state.
Wow.
So that's 70% of all age-eligible children, which is pretty much landmark as we look across other states that have implemented this program. This is one of the highest in the country.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And so it's hard to, we're sometimes drilled down on the data so much, but that we kind of lose the forest for the trees when it comes to the number of people that we're serving. So it's always exciting to do that. One of the other questions you said that was different in the governor's budget is that there was this resending of materials. One of the big challenges we asked many years ago is, what do we do if they get sent back to us? And unbeknownst to us, they were stored somewhere or given away or something. So I guess the additional, yes, unfortunately in the trash, but unfortunately, it sounds to me like that we've found a new way to purpose these books by paying for postage to go to schools.
Well, so there's two things happening. So the Imagination Library books, those are mailed through the U.S. Postal Service. So there's only so much limitations due to federal laws around the mail rate in which those books go out. These K-3 books, which this is request is for, is actually shipped through UPS or another vendor with return shipping. So it's at a rate where we ensure that those materials come back to us, and then we can make sure that they get to their designation or to repurpose them appropriately without any waste.
Okay, well, that's great. I guess one of the other questions that I sometimes get about this program is who decides what books? I did notice, I did read the other day, Dolly Parton's now an author of her own book, which is kind of interesting. My wife just showed it to me this weekend, as a matter of fact. But so how do these books selected? How do we know which ones we're sending kids? What is that process like? Is it you do that, or who does that?
So there's a blue ribbon selection committee that works with Dolly Parton's foundation. They go through a selection process each year in which they decide which books will be in the upcoming year. If parents are interested, they can find that on our website as well as Dolly Parton's foundation's website. For the K-3 books, we wanted to go through a process that was rigorous and aligned with our curriculum and standards. So this Educator Advisory Council that we brought on is 21 representatives across the state, representing everything from kindergarten teachers to district supervisors that go through a selection process, looking at content as well as are there ways to align those books with the learning content that every rising first, second, and third grader will need in the upcoming school year that will give them some familiarity with the knowledge base as well as to be grade appropriate.
Right. So that 21-member advisory council, is this something that is made known to the public so citizens and families can reach out and contact them or those members of the advisory council?
Yes, sir. On the website, all advisory council members are listed on the website along with their title and the district that they represent.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining us here today. I don't know that there's any issue more important facing the state than this whole early literacy. We just see so many things downstream, not good things that result from children not being able to read at grade level. And, you know, the old adage, sad but true, that a state can determine their prison needs and prison population needs based on the number of children that aren't reading properly at or reading on grade level at grade 3. It's very sobering and obviously gives a lot of impetus to the work that's being done to change that or to bring all of those kids up to speed. And you all are certainly a key part of that. And for that, we thank you and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Turn it black.
Without objection, we are back in session. That does complete our calendar for today, and Representative Shaw has a motion to adjourn. I see a number of seconds. Leader Lambert, I'm sorry. Are you trying to get my attention? Leader Lambert was to be on the record as being the second for the motion to adjourn. Without objection, we are adjourned.